The air in the laboratory is always so pungent. The sour smell of chemical reagents mixed with the chlorine smell of disinfectant water is like an invisible hook, hooking everyone's nerves. The biochemistry building of a top university is brightly lit on the surface, and students are buried in front of microscopes, chasing data that can be published in Nature. But everyone knows that underneath this craze is endless competition, scholarships, letters of recommendation, and headhunting offers from multinational pharmaceutical companies, coiled like poisonous snakes behind every smiling face. When Ye Chen pushed open the heavy glass door, it was already 11 o'clock in the night. Beakers and centrifuge tubes were scattered around the experimental table, and the fluorescent lights were buzzing, casting long shadows. "Hey, new intern, why don't you get out? This is not a project that a freshman like you can take on." A doctoral student wearing thick-rimmed glasses raised his head, his voice full of ridicule. His fingers tapped on the keyboard, and toxicological data curves flashed on the screen. "The professor's experiments are confidential. Do you think you can get a share of the pie with your little chemistry knowledge? Save it and go home and watch the show." Ye Chen ignored it, just smiled slightly and put his white coat on his shoulders. His classmates have long advised him that this laboratory is a place where people eat people without spitting out their bones. The instructor, Professor Shen, holds a national fund, and it is common for students under him to fight for a spot and undermine each other. Last week, a master's student was expelled for falsifying data, causing a sensation throughout the department. But Ye Chen didn't care. He came here not for those false claims, but because he smelled the faint discord in the air. Those toxicology test reports, there were always a few pages of data curves that were strangely smooth, as if they had been erased by an eraser. He put on his gloves and moved closer to the centrifuge. The low roar of the machine shook the table. "The professor is working overtime tonight, reportedly to verify the metabolic pathway of a new type of nerve agent." Ye Chen glanced at the clock on the wall, the needle pointed to 11:45. Suddenly, a rapid gasp came from the inner room, like a beast being strangled by the throat. "Professor?" Ye Chen frowned and pushed open the door to the inner room. The lights inside are dim. Professor Shen is in his early 50s. He usually wears a neat suit, but now he is holding the experimental table with both hands, his face is ashen, and veins are popping up on his forehead. His fingers trembled as he grabbed a beaker, which contained a pale yellow liquid, and a faint smell of almonds filled the air, the classic smell of cyanide. The professor's eyes widened, his pupils dilated like black holes, his mouth opened but no sound came out, only a series of wet grunts squeezed out from the depths of his throat. He staggered and knocked over the test tube rack. The crisp sound of broken glass echoed in the room, and the fragments reflected the light, like countless sharp eyes. Ye Chen rushed forward and supported the professor's body. The professor's hand slipped weakly, and there was a trace of black residue stuck between the nails, as if scraped from the skin. "Professor! Hold on!" Ye Chen shouted, his heart beating like a drum. He quickly checked for a pulse, weak, shallow breathing, stiff limbs. "This is not a heart disease, this is a typical acute poisoning." A diagram from a textbook flashed through his mind, nerve agents that block acetylcholinesterase, causing muscle spasms and respiratory failure. The professor's eyes were still staring at him, full of despair and unwillingness, and then he tilted his head and became completely paralyzed. Ye Chen's hands trembled for a moment. He forced himself to calm down and glanced around. There was an unseen reagent bottle on the experimental table with a blurred label. The notebook next to him opened a page and scrawled, "Test Subject K-17, Accelerated Reaction." There was chaos outside the door, and other students rushed in after hearing the news. "Oh my God! What's wrong with the professor?" The doctoral student who mocked Ye Chen widened his eyes and turned pale. He took a step back and hit the door frame. Is this a heart attack? Call an ambulance." The crowd poured in, screaming and whispering. Some people called the emergency number, and some took pictures and posted them on WeChat. The smell of almonds in the air became stronger, mixed with the smell of sweat and panic. Ye Chen took advantage of the chaos and quickly picked up the residue from the professor's fingernails with tweezers and stuffed it into his pocket. The nail clippings are as small as rice grains, rough to the touch, and faintly black. He knew that this was the key. If it was really poisoned, the residue might contain traces of the murderer. 10 minutes later, the school security rushed in. The tall security guard pushed away the crowd and said in a voice like iron, "Everyone, stay back. This is the order of the school leaders, the scene is blocked." A middle-aged man in a dark suit followed, claiming to be the director of the school medical office. He put on gloves, roughly examined the professor's body, frowned and said, "Cardiac arrest is common among high-pressure researchers. Notify family members, and no external reports are allowed." "But, the professor was fine just now, why suddenly?" a girl asked in a trembling voice, her eyes red and swollen. The school doctor glanced at her and said coldly, "Too much pressure, my heart is overloaded. Leave it alone, there will be a report tomorrow." Security began to clear the area and drive away the students. Some protested, but were violently pushed away. Ye Chen lowered his head and blended in with the crowd, feeling a chill on his back. The doctoral student wiped his sweat and murmured, it's over, the laboratory is all yellow now." "Ye Chen, you were here just now, don't talk nonsense." Ye Chen didn't reply. He slipped out of the building. The night breeze was mixed with the scent of osmanthus on campus, but it couldn't hide the faint rancid smell of the residue in his pocket. It was already 1 o'clock in the morning when he returned to the dormitory, and his roommates were snoring loudly. He locked the door and took out the household microscope. This was a treasure he found at the flea market. Together with the spectrometer left by his father, he could do simple toxicology analysis. Under the light, he carefully placed the residue on the slide and put his eyes close to the eyepiece. Magnified 400 times, the black particles in the nail gaps are clearly visible, irregular crystals with jagged edges. Ye Chen's heartbeat accelerated. He dropped a drop of reagent. Under the microscope, the crystal slowly dissolved and emitted a faint fluorescence. This was not a common cyanide. He turned to the spectrometer and scanned infrared light. The curve on the screen jumped. The peak was at 1650 cm superscript 1, strong C equals O stretching vibration, and indications of fluoride. "This is organophosphorus nerve agent. An improved version." Ye Chen whispered, with the lab's confidential projects flashing through his mind. The professor's research was supposed to be antivenom. Why is there such a deadly thing? Data show that the agent has an unusually short half-life and is specifically designed to kill quickly and not be easily detected. He remembered that the school newspaper mentioned that multinational pharmaceutical companies funded the toxicology center here. Could it be? Suddenly, a burst of soft footsteps came from outside the door. The corridor of the dormitory should have been quiet, but this sound was as light as a cat's paw, but it was particularly harsh in the silence. Ye Chen froze, turned off the light, and peeked through the crack in the door. The corridor was dimly lit, and a vague figure flashed past and stopped in front of his door, its shadow elongated like a ghost. The smell of almond seems to be wafting in the air again. He held the spectrometer tightly, sweat sliding down his forehead. The figure lingered for a moment, then left quietly. But Ye Chen knew that this was not an illusion. Who is watching him? The professor's death was no accident. At this moment, there was another knock on the door, soft but urgent. "Ye Chen, it's me, Han Xiao. The professor's assistant. Open the door, we have to talk." Ye Chen's heart sank to the bottom. Han Xiao. The researcher who always wears a mask and has twinkling eyes never participates in small talk and only whispers beside the professor. He hesitated for a moment and held the doorknob, his palms slippery. The door opened, and Han Xiao stood there, his face as pale as paper, and his eyes flashing with complicated light. "What did you take? Don't think I didn't see it. The professor's death, you'd better stay out of your own business. There are some secrets that you can't look back upon." Her voice was trembling, but with a chill of warning. The surrounding air seemed to freeze, and Ye Chen felt that a bigger storm was coming. As soon as Han Xiao finished speaking, there were faint footsteps coming from the end of the corridor again, this time closer, like the shadows of many people approaching. Ye Chen's mind was spinning rapidly, the poison in the professor's nails, the school's cover-up, and now Han Xiao's night visit. The pieces of the truth were being pieced together bit by bit, but they also pushed him into the abyss. He pulled Han Xiao into the house and the door slammed shut. "Tell me, how much do you know?" His voice was low, his eyes locked on her face. Han Xiao stood against the wall, his chest rising and falling, his eyes swept across the microscope on the table, and his pupils suddenly shrank. You have discovered it? Oh my God, that residue, impossible, so fast." Her hands clenched into fists involuntarily, her knuckles turned white, and her voice was full of shock. Ye Chen sneered and pushed open the spectrometer screen, the curves were dazzling. Organophosphorus derivatives, substituted by fluorine, increased the toxicity by 20%. This is not an accident, it is murder. Do you know what the professor is investigating? Han Zhao's face turned from pale to livid. She took a step back and bumped into the bookshelf, and the books fell to the ground with a clatter. You are crazy. If this word spreads, we will all be dead. The laboratory has eyes, they are everywhere. That guy Gu Sheng was still complaining last week that the professor robbed his fund. No, it's not just him. Her words were like bombs, and Ye Chen's eyes lit up. Gu Sheng, an ambitious doctoral student, always has secret meetings with pharmaceutical company representatives. In the air, the smell of almonds seemed to be stronger, and Ye Chen smelled a dangerous smell. Tell me everything. Ye Chen took a step closer, Han Zhao's breathing became turbulent, and she stared at him like a monster. How did you analyze it so quickly? It took 2 days for the professor's equipment to be ready. Who are you? Her voice trembled, a mixture of admiration and fear. Ye Chen didn't answer, just turned off the screen. Outside, footsteps sounded again, this time accompanied by a whisper, "He's here," confirming the sample. The doorknob started to turn, and Ye Chen's heart beat wildly. Crisis, embattled on all sides. But there was a sneer on the corner of his mouth. The game has just begun. The word count is about 1650. The squeaking sound of the doorknob turning was like a sharp knife cutting through the glass in the quiet dormitory, and the hair on the back of Ye Chen's neck stood up. He covered Han Zhao's mouth and pressed her into the shadow of the bed. Their breathing was suppressed into thin threads, and the air was filled with her faint lavender fragrance and the lingering rancid smell of almonds. Outside the door, a whisper sounded like a ghost, "Are you sure no one is? The sample is inside." The key tapped lightly on the keyhole, making a harsh sound of metal friction. Ye Chen's mind was flashing, and he scanned the room. The window was half open, and the night wind blew the curtains like ghosts dancing. Under the window sill is the lawn on the second floor. You can survive by jumping, but Han Zhao's footsteps will be exposed. He grabbed the spectrometer on the table and slammed it against the inside of the door lock. It made a muffled sound and the door handle got stuck for a moment. The person outside cursed, "Damn it, the lock is broken." There was a loud sound of footsteps, and he took a few steps back, followed by the hiss of the radio, "The target dormitory is the same, evacuate." The shadow lengthened and shortened under the crack of the door, gradually getting further and further away. Ye Chen let go of his hand, and Han Xiao crawled out panting, her cheeks flushed, and her eyes as wide as copper bells. How do you know you can block it by smashing the lock? They have the master key. Her voice trembled, with unbelievable shock, and her fingers unconsciously touched the doorknob, which felt as cold as iron. Ye Chen wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and said calmly, "Standard dormitory lock, the weak point of the inner spring is at 9 o'clock. If you hit the right place, it will be stuck for 5 seconds, which is enough for them to suspect and call the police." He turned around to collect the microscope and residual samples and stuffed them into his backpack. it's not safe here. Let's go now. Han Xiao froze on the spot, staring at him like a monster. Freshman. You managed to get the professor's professional equipment in 2 minutes, and now you don't even know the security routine. What the hell? Her words were stuck in her throat, and the fire of admiration flickered in fear. Stop talking nonsense and follow up. Ye Chen pulled her out. The corridor was empty except for the buzzing of fluorescent lights and distant snoring. The night breeze mixed with the fragrance of osmanthus hit their faces, covering their footsteps. They slipped out of the dormitory building. The campus paths were filled with mist, and the street lights cast mottled shadows, like countless hands scratching the ground. At 1:30 in the morning, security was still patrolling outside the biochemistry building, but the archives room was in the basement, and the back door was hidden. Ye Chen had previously observed that he had paid attention to the escape route before the professor died. You watch the wind, I'll go in for 5 minutes. He whispered, handing Han Xiao a master key he took out of his pocket, an old thing left by his father, specially used to pick mechanical locks. Han Xiao's pupils dilated. You even have this? God, this is a crime. But she still took it, squatting in the shadow, tapping her teeth lightly, her fingers trembling with nervousness. Ye Chen sneaked into the back door. The air in the stairwell was damp and moldy, mixed with the decaying smell of old paper and faint chemical residue. He put on the flashlight, and the weak beam swept across the iron door, revealing the rusty keyhole. He inserted the key, turned it slightly, and it clicked to open. In the archives room, there are many iron cabinets, and the dust is flying in the light, like countless ghosts hovering. The air was stuffy, and my sense of smell was bombarded with musty smells and the sourness of ink. He went straight to the Professor Shen cabinet. The drawer was locked, but he used a wire to pry it open, as skillfully as breathing. There are piles of documents inside and the labels are yellowing. He rummaged through recent records, and his fingers touched a stack of encrypted USB drives and paper reports with deleted traces. With his heart racing, he scanned a fragment of the page, Project K-17, Top Secret Poison Testing, Metabolic Pathway Optimization, funded by Global Pharmaceutical Alliance. Data encryption level S3, permanently deleted. Deleted? Ye Chen cursed and pieced together in his mind, the professor's notes, test subject K-17, accelerated reaction, is this a human test? Illegal. He plugged in his laptop and started running the cracking software at high speed, the old hacking skills taught by his father. The fluorescent screen reflected his stern face. Partial recovery. The curve shows that the half-life of the poison in the human body is only 30 minutes, and it is specially designed for killing without trace. Next to the professor's signature, there was a scrawled note, oppose profit-making testing, the risk is too high, please notify the school to suspend it. There were 3 gentle knocks on the door, Han Zhao's secret signal. He pulled out the USB flash drive and slipped out. Outside, her face turned pale, security is around the corner, hurry up. They ran to the secluded spot by the lake on campus, breathing to calm down. What did you find? Han Xiao asked anxiously, his eyes flashing with anticipation and uneasiness. Ye Chen threw a USB flash drive to her, K-17, nerve agent, illegal human testing. The professor objected and the data was wiped. The school is covering up the profit-making scandal. He stared at her, how much do you know? Don't pretend. Han Xiao bit his lip and leaned against the willow tree by the lake, the leaves rustling like a whisper. She took a deep breath, calmed down, and said in a voice as cold as ice, the professor came to see me last week. He said that Gu Xing had a private deal with a pharmaceutical representative, selling test data in exchange for funds. The professor wants to expose it, and the result, you know. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were firm, I have backdoor permissions and can pull surveillance. But the risk is high. Pull. Ye Chen said decisively. She used her mobile phone to connect to the backstage of the laboratory. The lake reflected the moonlight, and the ripples distorted their faces. The picture popped up. At 11 o'clock in the night, before the professor entered the inner room, Gu Xing appeared furtively, holding a black bag in his hand and a mask covering his face, and slipped into the file area. The camera switches to show him taking the reagent bottle from the professor's desk. It's the one with the blurred label. Han Xiao gasped and almost dropped her phone in the lake. Gu Xing. He came in and out late at night, half an hour before the professor's death. This evidence is irrefutable. Her voice rose and she looked at Ye Chen with admiration. Your inference was so accurate. I thought I had to wait for the police, but you are simply a genius. Ye Chen shook his head. It's not enough. The almond smell is masked, and the fluorine substitution makes it traceless. The professor's nail residue matches the K17 crystal structure. He was about to elaborate when high heels clicked on the path by the lake. A figure ran towards him, with long hair flying, and tears glistening under the moonlight. Wait! Ye Chen. Sister Han Xiao. The girl's voice was choked, and she knelt down, her white skirt stained with mud. She is in her early 20s, wearing a medical school uniform, and her eyes are as red and swollen as rabbits. I am Su Wan, a junior in medical school. Please help me check my boyfriend. He is also a disciple of Professor Shen. He suffered a cardiac arrest in the laboratory last month, just like the professor. The school said it was an accident, but I smell almonds on his clothes. Han Xiao helped her up and was shocked. Your boyfriend? Lise. The case has been suppressed and the file has been sealed. Su Wan burst into tears and grabbed Ye Chen's sleeve. Yes. Before he died, he said that Gu Xing forced him to sign a confidentiality agreement to test the new drug on living subjects. Please, Ye Chen, I heard that you were here tonight and analyzed the professor's corpse. You are the only one who dares to take care of it. The surrounding willow branches drooped, the wind blew across the lake and splashed water, and Su Wan's cries echoed like tears of blood. Han Xiao looked at Ye Chen with complicated eyes. She is right, your ability. The three of us join forces. Ye Chen knelt down and wiped her tears with a gentle but firm voice. Get up. Give me a sample of Lise's clothing and I will do a toxicological analysis. He took out the clip from his backpack and demonstrated the nail residue, same type of crystal, 1650 cm superscript 1 peak, fluorine organophosphorus. It's not an accident, it's a serial murder. Su Wan's beautiful eyes widened. Her tears stopped, and she trembled. You, so fast. It takes a week for the professor's equipment. How could you? Her hand covered his, admiration came over her like a tide, her fingertips were cold but strong. There was a faint light in the sky, and they moved to the study room on the 3rd floor of the library. At 4 o'clock in the morning, there was no one there. There are shadows on the bookshelves, and the smell of books and ink is mixed with coffee grounds in the air. Ye Chen laid out his laptop, the USB flash drive data was projected, and the curves jumped dazzlingly. Han Xiao entered the background, and the surveillance footage captured Gu Xing's figure. Su Wan handed over the scraps of Lise's collar and Ye Chen dropped the reagent, and the fluorescent light flashed, a perfect match. Look here, Ye Chen pointed at the screen. Gu Xing's frequency of entry and exit, test night match death. K17 profit-making plan, Secretary Shen Qingqing was the one who pulled the strings, the funding form she signed. He sneered, IQ crushes them. Han Zhao's eyes were bright. You even dug out Shen Qingqing. She is a senior member of the school and never shows up. Su Wan covered her mouth and took a step back in shock, knocking over the chair and making a loud noise that echoed through the empty library. During the heated discussion, the three people's mobile phones vibrated at the same time. An anonymous text message jumped into view. The picture was a screenshot of the surveillance camera at the door of Ye Chen's dormitory, followed by the text, "Stop investigating K17, otherwise you will be next. There is no more residue, burn the USB disk." The air froze instantly. Su Wan screamed, Han Zhao's face turned livid, and his phone fell to the ground with a clatter. Ye Chen stared at the screen, and the corners of his mouth slowly raised. Here they come. They are panicking. Outside the lake, the morning mist rose, and the crisis followed him like a shadow, but his eyes were like a falcon locking its prey. Outside the library window, the first ray of sunlight pierced the darkness, but it could not illuminate the hidden conspiracy. Gu Xing's shadow was frozen in the surveillance camera, with a cold smile, while Ye Chen had already grasped the sharp blade to fight back. The storm really kicked off. The air in the study room on the third floor of the library froze instantly, and the fluorescent light of anonymous text messages flickered faintly on the three people's mobile phones, like poisonous snakes spitting messages. Su Wan's scream cut through the silence like broken glass. She held her head in her hands, her shoulders trembled, tears fell down her cheeks, and they hit the wooden table with a tiny clatter. They are targeting us. Destroy all the USB drives and samples, we will die. Her voice was intermittent and full of despair. Her eyes stared at Ye Chen, as if grasping the last straw, but she backed away in fear. The overturned chair was still rolling on the floor, echoing a hollow roar. Han Zhao's cell phone fell to the ground and cracked the screen. When she picked it up, her fingers were shaking like chaff and her face was as white as paper. Ye Chen, this is professional surveillance. They have a mole. The professor had a similar one before he died, and the result. She swallowed, and the scent of lavender mixed with her rapid breathing, filling the shadows of the bookshelf. The morning fog outside the window was thick, and the sunlight pierced the clouds but only cast a pale halo, making the faces of the three people distorted like ghosts. The surrounding bookshelves towered like cages, dust swirled in the beams, and the bitter smell of coffee grounds in the air became pungent and breathless. Test the poison first. Ye Chen took out the household microscope and his father's old spectrometer from his backpack. Under the desk light, he picked up the professor's fingernail residue and Li Zhe's clothing scraps, and dropped in the homemade reagent. The instrument buzzed and started, and the infrared peak value of 1650 cm superscript 1 flashed dazzlingly. Fluorine replaced organophosphorus neurotoxin, a rare improved version with a half-life of only 30 minutes, specially designed for traceless killing. The almond flavor is just cheaply masked, and the crystal structure perfectly matches the USB K17 curve. Look here, he pointed at the screen, his voice as calm as dead water, the school's toxicology report. They falsified it into natural heart failure, and moved the peak value to 1,400. The data was falsified at a very low level. Ye Chen stared at the text message, the corners of his mouth slowly raised, and he sneered like a knife unsheathed. Why are you panic? They sent this thing to prove that we have hit a sore spot. They can't erase the K17 data. His fingers were tapping quickly on the laptop keyboard, and the fluorescent screen reflected his stern profile, and the U-disk data curve jumped like a heartbeat. Su Wan and Han Xiao came closer, their breathing stagnant, their eyes as wide as bells, waiting for a miracle. Han Xiao gasped, put her hand on her mouth, and her pupils dilated to the limit. You used household instruments to detect the loopholes in the school's professional report. Oh my God, this is a variant of fluoride, a globally banned drug. It takes 3 days to teach the equipment, but you 2 minutes. Her voice trembled, her worship was like a volcano erupting. She grabbed Ye Chen's arm, her nails were embedded in the flesh without even realizing it. Su Wan's eyes were filled with tears, and she stared at Curvy Ru to look at the savior, Li Zhe. He was not an accident. Gu Xing forced him to sign a confidentiality agreement, and now the evidence is ironclad. She choked, but her eyes ignited with hope, and she clenched her fists. We can't stop. Go to the laboratory. Gu Xing's workstation has background records. I heard Li Zhe mentioned it. Ye Chen put away the instrument, his eyes like an eagle. Let's go. Now. The campus is still foggy, and the security guard is on duty. The three of them slipped out of the library. At 4:30 in the morning, the campus paths were filled with fog like a ghost land. The buzzing street lights cast a blood-red halo, and their footsteps made a sticky crunch on the fallen leaves. The biochemistry building stands in front, as dark as a giant beast, the windows reflect the fog, and there is a faint green fluorescence, the laboratory lights are still on. The feeling of disharmony is like a needle pricking the back of the neck. The back door is hidden. Ye Chen turns the master key lightly and clicks to unlock it. The stairwell smells damp and musty, pungent and sour mixed with chemical residues, and the walls are stained with water stains like blood stains. They sneaked into the corridor on the first floor. The air was freezing and biting, and the sound of dripping water in the distance echoed like a heartbeat. Han Xiao led the way and whispered, "Gu Xing's platform is in Area B. The password is his birthday plus project number." I overheard it. Su Wan followed closely, her teeth chattering, and her skirt made a tiny rustle from friction. In front of the door of Area B, the red light of the electronic lock flashes. Ye Chen took Han Zhao's mobile phone and connected it to the Bluetooth cracker, his father's hacker legacy. The software invaded like a virus, and the password scrolled rapidly, 1992-05-17, K17. The green light turned on, the door slid open, and the cold air spurted out amid the buzzing sound, mixed with the chill of the glass of the reagent bottle. The fluorescent screen of the workstation is dimly blue, the desktop is littered with documents, and the smell of rancid almonds lingers faintly in the air. Quick! Ye Chen sat down, inserted the USB flash drive, and synchronized the data. Han Xiao guarded the door while Su Wan scanned the drawers. A transaction record popped up on the screen, Gu Xing's email exchange, recipient, globalpharma_rep at darknet, attached K17 test data, screenshot of transfer in exchange for $500,000. List of human living test subjects, Li Zhe is the third one. The professor was a witness and was poisoned to silence him. Su Wan turned over the note, Secretary Shen Qingqing approves the fund, and Gu Xing keeps the dividends. Han Zhao's eyes widened and her voice was suppressed and sharp, 500,000, he sold out to his fellow students. The professor objected, so. She turned to look at Ye Chen, her hands shaking like the wind, it only took you 10 seconds to crack the password. This workstation is S3 encrypted, and it would take even the school's experts half an hour. Su Wan covered her mouth and backed away, bumping into the reagent rack, the bottles clinking and shaking, Shen Qingqing. School senior management. We are finished. Despair came like a tide, the three people's faces turned pale, beads of sweat rolled down, and the rotten smell in the air intensified, like the breath of death. Suddenly, there were quick footsteps outside the door, and the tapping of high heels was like a drumbeat. Gu Sheng. He pushed the door open, his face half covered with a mask, his eyes were bloodshot, and he held a reagent bottle in his hand. The green liquid swayed like a will-o'-the-wisp, you bugs. Who gave me the courage to touch my platform? His voice was hoarse and twisted, full of madness, and mist seeped through the cracks in the door, making his figure elongate like a ghost. Su Wan screamed and backed away, but Han Xiao stood in front of him, his legs so weak that he almost fell to his knees. Gu Sheng. You took the reagents late at night and killed the professor and Li Zhe. Surveillance is irrefutable evidence. Gu Sheng smiled ferociously, threw off the mask, and his cheeks twitched, testing. Yes, K17 makes a profit, I admit it. But killing? It's a joke. The professor himself objected, the data was just lost. Li Zhe has a weak heart, it's just an accident. You have no evidence. Ye Chen stood up slowly, his eyes were cold, and he tapped the keyboard with his fingers. The transaction email on the screen was frozen, 500,000 transfer, living list, you forced Li Zhe to sign. The school reported you for tampering, and the peak shift is naive. He sneered, IQ is so low that you think almond flavor can deceive infrared? Gu Sheng's face changed suddenly, and his pupils shrank like needlepoints. Boy, how did you know? He rushed forward, holding the reagent bottle high, and splashed green liquid on Ye Chen's face, a highly toxic corrosive, and the acid mist filled the air, making people cough. Han Xiao screamed, Ye Chen. Su Wan collapsed, tears welling up, no. The ultimate oppression of wanting to rise before suppressing, green liquid splashes, and the shadow of death hangs over. But Ye Chen dodged sideways, as agile as a ghost, and kicked over the reagent rack. The bottle shattered and green mist exploded. Gu Xing choked and backed away, her eyes stinging and tears streaming down her face. Ye Chen grabbed the table lamp and smashed it on his wrist. The bottle flew out of his hand, hit the wall and exploded. The acid splashed on the ground and corroded the tiles, making a scream like a ghost crying or a wolf howling. Gu Xing roared in pain, flinging his sleeves to fight back, the wind of his fists howling. Chase breaks out. The lights in the corridor flickered and the footsteps sounded like thunder. Gu Xing pushed open the safety door, and the iron door slammed shut. Ye Chen pushed it open with one shoulder, causing debris to fly. Han Xiaola and Su Wan followed. Ye Chen, don't chase. It's dangerous. But Su Wan's eyes widened and her voice trembled in admiration. He dodged poison. It's like a movie, God. The laboratory passage is narrow, the reagent racks are overturned, the glass is broken all over the floor, and the feet crunch like stepping on corpses. Gu Xing gasped and cursed, boy, you're dead. Secretary Shen will take care of it. He slid around the corner, and Ye Chen accelerated to catch up, tripping him. Gu Xing rolled to the ground, and the phone was thrown out and slid to Ye Chen's feet. The fluorescent screen lit up, and the call record came into view, Shen Qingqing's number, and the voice clip, destroy all the residue of K-17, Gu Xing, you know. Gu Xing got up, failed to pick up his cell phone, and fled through the fire escape. The fog outside the door engulfed the figure. You guys wait. The footsteps went away, leaving only the echo of laughter like a ghost. Ye Chen picked up his phone, and the record on the screen was frozen. Amid the acid mist, he sneered, the evidence is in hand. The school covered it up, and Shen Qingqing ordered its destruction. The conspiracy was confirmed. Han Xiao and Su Wan ran towards him, panting, and threw themselves at his side. Han Xiao touched his arm to make sure there was no injury, her eyes flashed with tears. You kicked him, flashed poison, and caught up with him. Dr. Gu Xing, you crushed him as a freshman. You are a monster. Her voice was high-pitched, she was trembling with admiration, and she hugged his shoulders. Su Wan knelt down to pick up the fragments, smiling through her tears as she stared at her phone. Shen Qingqing personally ordered. Li Zhe and Professor's revenge. We won the first step. She stood up and held Ye Chen's hand, her fingertips intertwined with ice and heat. You save us, with your IQ, skill, and omnipotence. Without you, we would have died early. At the end of the passage, the emergency lights flashed red, the acid mist gradually dissipated, and the corrosive smell in the air was as pungent as blood. Gu Xing escaped, but the records on her cell phone were like bombs, and Shen Qingqing's shadow lengthened. The three of them gasped and calmed down, and Ye Chen put away his mobile phone. The destruction order has been issued, and they are going to take action. When we turn around to ferment the evidence, the whole school is shocked. In the fog outside the window, a faint siren sounded. The crisis is not over, and the counterattack is fierce. The red light of the emergency light at the end of the passage pulsed like blood, and the acid mist was still burning in the nasal cavity, leaving a metallic smell. Ye Chen held Gu Xing's cell phone tightly, and the cold blue light from the screen reflected on his face, illuminating his sharp outline. The three of them panted like bellows, and sweat mixed with mist slid down their foreheads, dripping on the tiles and making a fine hissing sound. The corrosion residue was still devouring the ground. In the distance, police sirens faintly seeped out of the fog, as low as the roar of wild beasts. There was something unusual about the campus security. Let's go. Backstairs. Ye Chen shouted, grabbing Su Wan's arm. Her legs were as weak as cotton, her step staggered, and her skirt clicked against the broken glass. Han Xiao was exploring the way forward, the flashlight beam flickering on the wall, reflecting water stains like grimaces. The stairwell is even colder, and the musty and rotten smell mixed with the sour smell of reagents goes straight into the lungs and makes people cough. The footsteps echoed on the iron ladder, amplified into thunder, and every step was like stepping on the apex of the heart. They're here. Why are the security patrols so fast? Su Wan's voice trembled like a candle in the wind, her eyes were red and swollen as she stared into the darkness behind, with fear like vines. Gu Xing called the police. We broke into the empty door and started a fight. No matter how strong the evidence is, we can prove the crime of sabotage. She bit her lip tightly, tears rolled down, and hit the handrail with a crisp clang. Despair surged up like a tide. She crossed her arms and backed away, bumping into Han Xiao. Ye Chen stopped, the police siren could be clearly heard, and the red and blue halo seeped into the fog from the cracks in the window, wandering like a will-o'-the-wisp. He stared at the phone, the corners of his mouth sank slightly, and his figure in the mist looked like a lone wolf, so calm that it was chilling. What a panic. Fingerprints. We have all the tools at home. He took out a silver needle and homemade electrolyte from his backpack, a legacy from his father's hacker, specializing in breaking biometric locks. The needle tip pierced the side seam of the phone, liquid dripped, there was an arc flash, the screen was unlocked, and the call record popped up. Shen Qingqing's voice was as clear as a knife. Gu Sheng, all the remains of K-17 are burned, the living data is encrypted and backed up to Global Pharma, the professor threatened to report, you know how to handle it. Han Zhao's face turned pale. The smell of lavender perfume was diluted by sweat and became bitter. She swallowed and held the phone until her knuckles turned white. Ye Chen, the phone is locked. Gu Xing's fingerprint is encrypted. Without the password, the full call record cannot be opened. The destruction order cannot be heard clearly. The evidence is half complete, our pursuit is in vain. Her voice was high and crying, her admiration was extinguished as soon as it started, her legs went weak and she knelt on the steps, her head buried in her knees, her shoulders trembling. It's over. Senior Shen Qingqing, how can we three students fight? Su Wan raised her head, her pupils shrank suddenly, her mouth opened wide and she couldn't close it. You, electrolytic fingerprint. Unlock in 2 seconds. Even a professor can't open this military-grade phone. Her voice was broken, fear turned to shock, she got up and rushed to Ye Chen, grabbing his sleeves, her nails embedded without realizing it, her eyes flickered with admiration. Monster, why do you even have these tools? Han Xiao wiped away tears and stood up, moved closer to the screen, her breathing stopped. Global Pharmaceuticals, transnational black market. They bought K-17 and sold it to terrorist organizations. The professor found the transaction email and notified the principal last night to report the FBI. Gu Xing panicked and poisoned her to silence her. She slid her fingers to record, her face turned from white to green, her voice trembled like a leaf. 500,000 is just a small head, and the subsequent contract is hundreds of millions of dollars. Li Zhe is a test pig, and the third one, the heart failure, is perfectly disguised. The sirens were approaching, and there was a faint shout from downstairs, there is a strange noise in the biology building. Block the exit. The footsteps were like a swarm of rats, and the security radio rang through the fog. Su Wan screamed and lowered her voice, they've blocked the door. We can't fly without our wings. Desperation returned, and she squatted down with her head in her hands, her skirt soaked with tears, the fog in the air became thicker, and her vision blurred into ghostly shadows. Ye Chen sneered, glanced at the pile of reagent residue at the end of the passage, and grabbed 2 bottles of aerosol, a regular stock in the laboratory, with blurred labels. He turned the valve, and green mist exploded like a tornado, choking his nose and dazzling his eyes, and swallowed up the stairs in an instant. Run! Abandoned warehouse in Area C. He pulled Su Wan with one hand and pushed Han Xiao with the other. The figure in the fog was like a charm, and his footsteps were silent. The security guard rushed in, coughing and cursing. What ghost fog? Where are the people? The flashlight flashed randomly, the shelves were knocked over and they clanged, and the tracking sounds were chaotic. The three of them rushed out of the back door. The foggy campus paths were like a maze, the street lamps were blood red and the fallen leaves crunched like bones when stepped on. At 5:30 in the morning, the sky is slightly white, the cold wind is blowing like a knife on my face, and the sound of police sirens echoes in the distance. The abandoned warehouse is hidden behind the biology building. The rusted iron door is ajar. When you push it open, it creaks and screams. Dust blows into your face. The moldy cardboard boxes are piled like a tomb. The air is dead and rusty. The door closed, Ye Chen gasped against the wall, lit up his laptop, and sent all the data on his mobile phone. Security. Analysis. Han Xiao sat down on the cardboard box, her chest heaving, and the smell of lavender mixed with dust became pungent. She stared at the screen, her eyes widened. The professor's email backup is here. Illegal synthesis of K-17, fluorine replaced Selinki, in vivo testing violated the treaty, sold global pharma on the black market, reported the school Shenqingqing's knowledge. He sent the principal at 5 o'clock last night, and was poisoned 10 minutes later. Su Wan shakily took out a small book from her bag, Li Zhe's diary, with yellowed sweat stains on the edges. I hid it for a long time. It was written by Li Zhe. Gu Xing forced me to drink K-17 diluent, my heart was on fire, I had to sign it to keep it secret or else it would ruin my future. The professor discovered, I'm afraid of reporting it. The almond smell is a mask, the peak value is 1650, don't believe the school report. Her voice was choked with tears, and the ink was blurred on the paper, filled with despair. Gu Xing threatened. He said the test was harmless, but Li Zhe died in pain on the experimental table. The screen curve jumps, and the synthesis simulation path is perfectly reproduced. Raw material phenolic ester plus ammonium fluoride, high-pressure reaction, and the product crystal matches the K-17U disc. Han Xiao took a step back, put her hand on her mouth, her face turned pale and turned red. Oh my God, it's not an accident. This route is banned globally, and only the Gu Xing station in the laboratory has raw materials in stock. The professor's equipment will produce results in 3 days, and you can use it to poke holes. Now I'm professionally reproducing it, an iron chain of evidence. Her voice trembled until it broke, and she turned to stare at Ye Chen, her eyes filled with wet admiration. Ye Chen, you predicted the security guard and used smoke to get away. Freshmen, with full IQ and hacker skills, we too are useless with PhD degrees. Han Xiao snatched the diary, her pupils were dilated, and her voice was sharp and suppressed. It matches. But to prove the synthesis path, you need professional instruments. There is an old mass spectrometer next to the warehouse, which the professor abandoned. I can use it. She pulled Ye Chen to stand up, and the three of them sneaked into the side door of Area C in the fog. The lights in the abandoned subroom were half broken and the instruments were covered with dust like a coffin. Han Xiao started wiping, the buzzing made dust fly, and the smell of ionization in the air was pungent. She entered the residue data and described the path in her diary: 3-step improvement of phosphorus, oxychloride and fluoride, reducing the half-life to 30 minutes. Su Wan knelt in front of the instrument, caressing the curves as if caressing Li Zhe's face, smiling through her tears. Add this to Li Zhe's diary, Gu Xing is sentenced to death. Shenqingqing funded the black market, and the principal suppressed the report. She stood up and hugged Ye Chen's arm, her fingertips were hot. You led us from drug testing in the library to chasing Gu Xing out of the security guard, and we won everything. Without you, we would have been arrested or dead. Ye Chen tapped on his laptop and packaged and encrypted the data. Global Pharma is not just buying and selling, the email implies that the alliance is funding the school to build a secret wing and test military poisons. Professors reported to the center, leading to serial killings. He sneered, mist seeping through the window cracks, distorting the halo of the screen. Expand. Send an anonymous school network, forcing Shenqingqing to jump. Outside the warehouse, the security radio rang again, and footsteps approached. the fog has cleared, check the abandoned area. Their hearts beat like drums, and the three of them held their breath. Suddenly, Su Wan's cell phone vibrated, and there was an anonymous package notification, the school email notification, and the Lise's relics were collected from the medical school cabinet. Her expression suddenly changed. Lise. Did he send it before he died? Is it here now? She gritted her teeth in fear. Go and get it, the hook is too big. Ye Chen's eyes flashed. Let's go. The fog will cover us. The three of them slipped out. It was already dawn on the campus, the fog was thin and chilly, and the shadow of the medical school building was like the mouth of a giant beast. The cabinet area was empty and the iron cabinet was rusty. Su Wan entered the code and opened it with a click, a small package with no sender. Inside was an old mobile phone case wrapped in a USB flash drive, with Truth LZ engraved on the black case. She inserted her laptop with trembling hands, and the encrypted file popped up, the password prompt our appointment day, the diary contains it. Always 7.14. Unlocked, the file exploded, video of Lise gasping, Su Wan, K-17 is not only in the school, the Global Pharma Alliance has built an underground laboratory, led by Shen, to test political targets. The professor knows that I am a witness, and they are chasing. The video shook, the smell of almonds filled the air, and he fell. Attached is a blueprint, the hidden wing of the abandoned factory outside the school, marked 500 million funded by the Alliance, human body stage 3. Su Wan screamed and muffled her mouth, then collapsed on the ground, her eyes were as wide as copper bells, and she burst into tears. Underground laboratory, dignitaries. This is not a campus, this is a global conspiracy. Her voice was broken, and she was frightened to the extreme, grabbing Ye Chen's legs. Ye Chen, let's poke a hornet's nest. The Alliance won't blink an eye. Han Xiao picked up the USB flash drive, her pupils shrunk to needles, and her voice trembled like a sieve, the blueprint of the wing, off campus. Shen Qingqing is not only a secretary, but also an agent of the Alliance. Professor Lise died, let's try his best. She turned around and hugged her knees, admiring the middle class in despair. Ye Chen, what should you do? At this level, we are ants. The air in the cabinet area of the medical school was as stagnant as a tomb, water dripped from the rusted edges of the iron cabinets, and the snapping sound amplified into a heartbeat in the silence. The footsteps of the security guards outside the window were chaotic, and the radio was blaring like insects. Check the cabinet area. There are footprints in the fog. The red and blue police light seeped through the cracks in the glass, and the bloody light stained the faces of the three people. Su Wan collapsed on the ground, her hands still holding onto Ye Chen's trouser legs, her nails embedded in the fabric, her fingertips cold and trembling, and the USB flash drive was as hot as coal embedded in her palm. Dignitaries test, wing blueprint, this is not something we can touch. Her voice shattered like glass, tears rolled down the bridge of her nose, mixed with dust and turned into mud marks, her eyes widened and stared at the screen, fear like a black tide swallowing her pupils. The Alliance kills people like mowing grass, we 3 students, the first to die if we break the news. Han Xiao knelt down to pick up the USB flash drive. The smell of lavender perfume was suppressed by the smell of sweat and rust and turned bitter. She swallowed, her face turned green and white, and her knuckles cracked as she held the phone. Ye Chen, the blueprint coordinates the abandoned factory outside the school, 500 million funding, human body phase 3. Shen Qingqing is taking the lead, and the FBI at this level has to form a special team. Case. Are we anonymous? Their hackers are chasing after them, and the dormitory surveillance is on them. She turned to look at Ye Chen, her admiration suddenly extinguished, her legs softened, and the dust hit her face, and she cried, so what if you are a genius? Poking holes in household equipment is child's play, this is a global black network. Ye Chen's eyes were like daggers, and the shadow of the security guard outside the window was approaching the crack of the door, as dark as a pack of wolves. He grabbed the 2 women and said in a low and cold voice, "Shut up. Scan the USB drive first. The laptop in his backpack buzzed to start up, and mist seeped in from under the door, wrapping cold and wet around his ankles like ghost hands. He inserted the USB flash drive, and after decryption, a new file popped up, the professor's encrypted email chain. Shen Qingqing personally signed, Fund Transfer K-17 project. Gu Sheng is responsible for the synthesis. Global Pharma pays 500,000 in advance, and subsequent hundreds of millions must not be leaked. Attached meeting minutes. At 8 o'clock last night, Shen Qingqing's voice said, Professor is troublesome, deal with it cleanly, wing testing is accelerated, and dignitary samples are in place. Gu Sheng replied tremblingly, understood, Secretary. Live data is backed up on the dark web. Ye Chen put away the USB flash drive, the security guard's figure flashed outside the window, and the siren sounded again. The corner of his mouth raised, and he sneered like an ice blade, bigger. Okay. Synthetic path, diary, voice, blueprint, the whole chain. Anonymous explosion of the entire network, alliance movement, we wait and see. Shen Qingqing, Gu Sheng, your doomsday. In the mist, his figure lengthened, the eyes of the three people turned from despair, and footsteps approached outside the passage. A new crisis followed like a shadow, and the counterattack was igniting. Su Wan came closer, her pupils shrank suddenly, and her mouth opened wide and couldn't close. Shen Qingqing signed it. Not only did she know about it, she was the sponsor. Fear turned to hatred, and she smashed her fist on the ground, her knuckles swollen and red. I had suspected it. Before Li Zhe died, he said that Secretary Shen often came to the laboratory, smiling. Ing touched his shoulder and asked, did the test go well? I thought she was concerned, but... Tears hit the screen, and she fainted at the edge of the email. She threw herself into Ye Chen's arms, her chest trembling, and her tears burned through his shirt. Ye Chen, how can we fight against the high-level officials? Han Xiao took a step back, put her hand on her mouth, and her face turned from green to gray, iron-proof. The male IP is on campus and sent by Shen's office. The poison is homemade, and the phosphorus and fluoride paths are exclusive to Gu Sheng's platform. Her voice trembled like a candle in the wind, staring at Ye Chen's figure, worshipping the flames in desperation, but the security guard blocked the door, and Gu Sheng's phone fell into your hands. He knew it was lost, so he will definitely fight back. There were shouts outside the door, there is someone inside. Open the door. The iron door banged, and dust fell like coffin soil. Ye Chen snorted coldly, grabbed an old newspaper from the cabinet and lit it. The firelight reflected his face like a demon, and the smoke rolled up and engulfed his sight. He kicked open the back window, and the grating came loose, the lock-picking technique his father taught him, 3-second bending. Jump. Pushing Su Wan out with one hand, the hem of her skirt was hooked and torn. She staggered to the ground and fell onto the muddy lawn. The muddy water splashed on her face and it was biting cold. Han Xiao followed, his ankles screaming and suffocating, and the smell of lavender was mixed with mud. The three of them crawled on the foggy path and fled. The security guard rushed into the locker area and coughed, smoke. He's gone. The police sirens shredded the horizon, and the campus streetlights were haloed with blood and cast long shadows. The three of them got into the abandoned prop shed in the playground behind the medical school. Ye Chen gasped and leaned against the wall, lighting up his laptop and backing up all the data. Dawn. Gu Sheng said the same thing. He thought we were dead in the fog and lost his phone in a panic. Su Wan curled up on her knees and hugged her chest, muddy water dripping down her hair, staring at him with red and swollen eyes. What a cliché. Gu Sheng is an ambitious man, he will kill Li Zhe without blinking an eye. She bit her lip, her voice was soft and trembling, and she reached out to touch Ye Chen's arm, her fingertips were hot and scratched the skin. Skin, you saved me from the beginning, the drug test in the library, the pursuit of Gu Sheng, the unlocking, and the smoke escape, it all depends on you. I believe in you. Feelings are like vines wrapped around her, admiration mixed with attachment. She leaned closer, breathing warmly on her neck. The sky was bright, the bell rang at 7 o'clock on campus, the fog cleared and the cold wind blew my bones. The three of them washed off the mud and changed clothes. Su-won had a spare in her bag, and Han Xiao sneaked it into the dormitory. Ye Chen put on a lab coat, pretending to be a sophomore in the Department of Chemistry, with a photo of Gu Xing in his notebook, and headed straight for Gu Xing's platform in the biology building. The corridor was crowded with people. Students whispered, the professor's body was dead last night, the laboratory was sealed, and the residual acid mist in the air was pungent. The door of Gu Xing's workroom was ajar, and the light inside was dim. He bent down to delete files, his face was ashen with beads of sweat rolling down his face, and he was typing on the keyboard like a machine gun. Han Xiao wiped her face, nodded in agreement, her pupils twinkling, yes. Interview disguise, sophomore and freshman curious about K-17. The office email proves that he met Shen Qingqing last night. Her voice was broken, her face was gray but her eyes were bright. Ye Chen, your tools and hacking skills are useless to our followers. Ye Chen knocked on the door and came in with a smile, hello, Mr. Gu. I am Li Ming, a second-year student. I heard that the professor was poisoned. I am curious about the K-17 project. Can I interview you? He came to the table, glanced at the blind spot of the surveillance camera, and hid his phone in his sleeve to record. Gu Xing raised his head and his pupils shrank. He recognized Ye Chen's outline but was not sure. The ambitious man was frightened and sneered, sophomore year. Get out. The project is confidential. His fingers trembled slightly and his eyes glanced outside the door. The smell of sweat mixed with reagents filled the air. His voice was high and thorny, what do you know? The professor had an accident. It's just a heart attack. Ye Chen didn't move, turned sideways to block the door, and smiled deeply, accident? Peak value 1650, fluorine replaces phosphorus path, global ban on homemade K-17, global pharma pays starting from 500,000 yuan, hundreds of millions of contracts. Secretary Shen held a meeting at 8 o'clock last night, destroyed the remaining backup darknet, and tested it with politicians in the wing. He poked his heart in a low voice, and took a screenshot of the email flashed on his laptop. Gu Xing's face suddenly turned pale, and the chair scratched the ground. He jumped up and grabbed Ye Chen's collar, his nails digging into his flesh. How did you know? Fear turned vicious, his eyes were red, and his voice was trembling and low, boy, I called the police on the evidence of break-in. I lost my cell phone. I guess it was stolen. He pressed the alarm bell under the table and clicked the mouse frantically at the same time, forging a log. Ye Chen's ID invaded the station and stole K-17 data. The screen flashed, hacker records uploaded for security. There was a chaotic sound of footsteps in the corridor, and security rushed in. Dr. Gu. Invasion. Students gathered around, whispering like buzzers. Su-won and Han Xiao were lurking outside, and were heartbroken when they heard the screams. Ye Chen broke free, sneered and pressed Gu Xing's shoulder with his backhand, pricking the acupoint with the tip of the needle, his father's martial arts legacy. Gu Xing's legs were weak and he knelt down, his face twisted and twitching. You, monster. Security broke in and held Ye Chen up with an iron arm. Theft. Follow me. The student's eyes widened. Sophomore student hacking the lab. Crazy. Overwhelmed with despair, Ye Chen was dragged into the corridor, flashlights shaking wildly, and onlookers' cell phone videos buzzing. Su-won rushed out and threw tears at the security guard. Let go. He is saving the professor to tell the truth. It was useless. Han Xiao calmed down, and the smell of lavender drifted away. She ducked into the mass spectrometry room and pulled security over her head. Wait. Gu is forging the platform log. Look at the synthesis path, 3 steps of phosphorus and fluoride, only he has the inventory, the peak value of 1650 matches the residue, it is not an accident. Her fingers flew around the instrument, the buzzing shook the air, and the curve jumped out with ironclad evidence. The email IP traceability was traced by Gu Xing's forgery, the time stamp was misplaced, and the hacker ID implant was too blunt. The security guard glared and let go. This. Dr. Gu. The students' onlookers gasped. Mass spectrometry reappeared. Senior Master Han is amazing. Gu Xing got up, her face was ashen, sweating like rain. Nonsense. But her legs were weak and she fell to the ground, her voice was trembling and intermittent. K-17 homemade, laboratory inventory, approved by Secretary Shen, meeting details, the wing is located in the eastern suburbs outside the school, and the Alliance agent said it herself. Han Xiao turned to stare at Ye Chen, her eyes wet with admiration. Ye Chen, you are so accurate with your words. Gu Xing blew up the meeting, and the poison confirmed the homemade inventory. She rushed to help him, her arms were hot, and the students gathered around and stared. Freshman. IQ crushes the doctor. Senior Sister Han calls him the leader. Su Wan hugged Ye Chen's waist, smiling through her tears, scratching her back with her fingertips. Shen Qingqing, I've always suspected it. Li Zhe said that there was a hidden secret in her smile, and she often asked for test data, and touched fun sheets. Feelings, you are my life. She whispered into her ear, her breathing was numb, and her eyes were like fire with attachment. Security escorted Gu Xing, and the students whispered loudly. Gu Xing failed in framing and blew himself up. Ye Chen shook it off, and transferred all the data to the laptop, sneering. Shen Qingqing's office. Infiltrate, original meeting minutes. The three of them slipped out of the biology building. The afternoon sun was dazzling, but the campus was covered with clouds. The wind picked up the fallen leaves and made them wet like flesh on the soles of their feet. Shen Qingqing's office in the administrative building is at the end of the 5th floor. The carpet in the corridor sucks your feet silently, and the lingering fragrance of lavender in the air, the same style as Han Zhao's, is unpleasant and pungent. The door lock was replaced, Ye Chen's silver needle pried it open, and it squeaked softly like a ghost sighing. The three of them sneaked in. The room was empty, the drawers were emptied, the computer was disassembled, the paintings on the wall were crooked, and the dust had not fallen yet but the documents were burnt and blackened. There is half a cigarette but in the ashtray on the windowsill, engraved with GP, Global Pharmaceuticals. Su Wan touched the table, her face turned pale, empty. Did she run away? She picked up the cigarette butts with trembling fingers, and the ashes fell like snow. Her fear returned, the original document of the meeting, the updated version of the blueprint. Han Xiao swept the floor and her pupils shrank, the cupboard was empty, and the hard drive was pulled out. Foreshadowing. She knew we were close, so she moved to another wing. She turned to stare at Ye Chen, with a chill in her admiration. Ye Chen, the plan has changed. Abandoned factory in the eastern suburbs, dignitaries test tonight. The afterglow of the setting sun seeped in like blood from the cracks in the windows of the administrative building. The air in Shen Qingqing's office was stagnant and turned into gel. The charred and burnt file fragments were scattered on the carpet. The pungent smell of molten plastic mixed with the residual fragrance of lavender was as inconsistent as flowers in a grave. Ye Chen squeezed the GP cigarette but tightly and rubbed the scratches with his fingertips. The cold metal felt like snake scales sliding across his skin. His eyes scanned the empty drawer and his voice was as low as a whetstone. Empty at all, but this is missing. Glob Alpharma's iron hook, she bites it to the bone. Footsteps approached faintly outside the door, making a dull sound like the beating of a heart. He waved his hand, and the three of them slipped out. The silver needle tapped the lock cylinder to reset it, and the clicking sound blended into the howling of the night wind. As night falls on the campus, the street lights are blurred and the three figures are elongated. The wind picks up the fallen leaves and wets the soles of their feet, trampling them like trampling their internal organs. Su Wan clung to Ye Chen's arm, her chest rose and fell violently, and her neck was numb and trembling with hot breath. Ye Chen, the smell of burning in the office is still in her nose. Shen Qingqing ran away, and we 3 students are chasing after the abandoned factory. A test for politicians, the Alliance kills people without blinking an eye. Her voice was broken, her tears were still wet, her eyes were wide and staring at the side of his face, with fear like black mist wrapped around her pupils. Lise's diary said that the blueprint of the wing contains heavy troops, the 3rd underground floor of the abandoned factory in the east suburbs, and the 3rd phase of K-17 living bodies. Shall we go and wait to die? Behind Han Xiao, the lavender perfume was diluted by sweat and turned bitter. She held a laptop in her hand, her knuckles were so white that they turned blue. She tripped over a dead branch with weak legs, and the snapping sound was harsh. Yes. Gu Xing blew himself up and sat in the standard, 5 kilometers outside the eastern suburbs of the school. The professor personally signed the email link to transfer the Shenqingqing fund, and Global Pharma paid 500,000 in advance. Follow up. But the security guard will arrest him, and will destroy the factory, in case the traitor. She gasped and picked up the laptop, turning to look at Ye Chen with a disgraced face, her admiration flames swaying in despair. Ye Chen, your spectrometer has penetrated the peak value of 1650, and the mass spectrum has reproduced Gu Xing's synthesis path, but what should we do if we are infected by the poisonous gas? Ye Chen said nothing and dragged the 2 of them into the abandoned prop shed in the playground behind the medical school. The iron sheets were rusty and creaking, and the musty and rotten smell of rat droppings inside filled his nose. The darkness swallowed his sight like ink. He turned on the laptop's backup light, and the blue light reflected the pale and distorted faces of the 3 of them. Repair. 3 hours. Inventory, full backup and upgrade. He threw off his backpack, and his father's old spectrometer hummed to start. The lenses of the household microscope flashed with cold light, the electrolyte bottles clinked and collided, and the U-disc data was scanned frantically. Professor, the peak value of fluorine substituted for phosphorus in nail residue is 1650. Shenqingqing's voice on Gu Xing's mobile phone. Process the professor clean. Lise's relics video wing blueprint. Lise's diary almonds covering up K-17 crystals. Surveillance obfuscated reagent bottles. Email chain Global Pharma dark web transactions. Ye Chen pinched the cigarette butt and sneered like a blade. The hook bites. Chase. The setting sun outside the window was blood red, and the long shadows were like sharp claws. A new crisis was surging like an undercurrent. There were faint footsteps outside the office door, and the lock was relocked. The 3 figures melted into the night, and the counterattack was blazing. Su Wan sat on the iron bucket with her knees curled up, her muddy skirt sticking to her legs and cold. She looked closely at the screen, her pupils shrank suddenly and her mouth opened wide and couldn't close. Oh my God, the whole chain. Shenqingqing personally signed the K-17 project. Gu Xing synthesized the 3 steps of stock phosphorus and fluoride. The professor witnessed it. Shut up, Lise's 3rd pig. A sample of $500 million in funding for politicians. Fear turned to hatred, and she banged her fist on the metal bucket. Her knuckles were swollen and she smashed the keyboard. How can we fight against the Alliance when the principal suppresses the report? The FBI is afraid of the underworld. Han Xiao knelt down to assist, with the smell of lavender in her nose. Her fingers were flying to compare the mass spectrum curves, and her voice shook like a candle in the wind. Match. The office GP. The DNA of the cigarette but ashes can be traced to Shenqingqing's fingerprints. The hard drive was removed, but there were footprints in the dust in the hidden compartment. High heels 3.8 centimeters, she moved last night. She looked up and stared at Ye Chen's operation, her eyes wet with admiration. Ye Chen, you backed up the dark network IP tracking. The home instrument was hacker level, and the timestamp of Gu Xing's forged log was misplaced. Monster. Ye Chen snorted, the silver needle pierced the cigarette butt filter, the crystal was magnified 1,000 times under the microscope, and the blue light reflected his face like a ghost. Upgrade. Cigarette but residual poison, trace amounts of K-17 attached. Detoxification, sodium nitrite neutralizes phosphorus and fluoride, household electrolyte plus vitamin C catalysis, the half-life is 30 minutes. He picked up the bottle and shook it. The liquid was bubbling, the sour and sweet taste washed into his nose and the moldy smell was suppressed. He prepared 3 doses of the syringe in 3 minutes, and the tip of the needle flashed. Prepare the wing for the test at 10 o'clock tonight, Shen Qingqing's hook is there. Su Wan rushed towards him, hugged his waist, scratched his back with her fingertips, and her chest trembled against the shirt. Ye Chen, you went from the library to check the almond smell of Li Zai's clothes, to the smoke removal cabinet area, to the self-explosion of Gu Sheng, to the sinking room, the omnipotent savior. She whispered in her ear, her breath was numb and hot, and her eyes were as attached to the fire vines. I believe it. The antidote needle is as hot as your heart. At 9 o'clock at night, the campus bell rang as dull as a death knell. The 3 of them slipped out of the shed. The fog came back and wrapped around their ankles with dampness. 5 kilometers away from the abandoned factory in the eastern suburbs, black riders rode shared bicycles wildly. The tires crunched against the tarmac, and the smell of blood was heard when a wind knife was used to scrape the face. The abandoned factory stands in the wilderness, the iron fence is broken and rusty, flies buzz around the muddy pond, and there is a faint pungent acid mist in the air, which is as unnatural as a cemetery chemical factory. The coordinates of the USB flash drive of the wing blueprint, the underground entrance in the southeast corner, hiding the container and camouflaging the sand pile. Han Xiao took the syringe, touched Ye Chen's finger with trembling hands, and blushed. God. Toxicology crushes professional instruments, and phosphorus replaces the path to solve your spectrum in seconds. Han Xiao is convinced, and the leadership is fully activated. Her voice was broken, gray eyes flashed, admiration mixed with enthusiasm. The minute hand of the 3 people was hidden in their sleeves, the data was fully compressed and anonymously backed up on the dark web, and the plan was finalized, pretending to scavenge in the abandoned factory, and raiding the blueprint coordinates of the wing building at night. Su Wan's legs went weak and she tugged on Ye Chen's sleeves. Fog, the smell of K-17. Heavy alliance troops, Li Zai's video said gun guards. Fear overwhelmed her, her teeth chattered, and her eyes widened to sweep away the darkness. Han Xiao swallowed, and the smell of lavender faded away. The blueprint is on the 3rd floor underground, and the server heat source can be scanned by infrared. But Gu Sheng is in custody, and Shen Qingqing is the one inside. Her voice was as thin as a mosquito, and her legs trembled as she stepped back. Ye Chen's eyes were like knives. A silver needle pried the iron cover from the sand, opened it with a creaking ghost cry, swallowed up the black hole in the stairs, and the moldy rotten smell and chemical acid rushed straight to his forehead, down. The 3 of them crawled in, the walls were slippery and dripping, and their heartbeats amplified into thunder. The lights on the 2nd underground floor flickered blue, the corridors were lined with test tube racks, the green liquid was bubbling, and the surveillance red dots were sweeping like wolf eyes. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, and the loudspeaker blared, Ye Chen. Come in. Kid, Gu Sheng predicts you will bite the hook. Gu Sheng's voice was hoarse and smiling, and he stumbled out of the dark corner, escaped after being detained by security. His face was green with sweat, his ambition was frightened, and the remote control in his hand flashed red. Secretary Shen asked me to guard it. Mist, K-17 aerosol, half-life extended version, take 1 sip, and the nerves will be burned out. The mist burst out, white mist surged out like a ghost, and the smell of sour almonds filled the nasal cavity. Su Wan was the first to bear the brunt. She coughed and bent over, with tears and runny nose running down her face. Her vision was blurred and her legs were soft and she knelt down. Ah, it burns my lungs. Ye Chen. Her fingernails broke when she scratched the ground, her chest spasmed, and she screamed in fear as harshly as broken glass. Han Xiao covered her mouth and backed away. The test tube rack clanked and fell, and the green liquid splashed and burned her feet. Toxic mist. The peak gas state is 1650, Gu Sheng upgraded. Her throat burned, the lavender fragrance was gone, her face turned purple and fell to the corner, her eyes turned white and she murmured, Ye Chen, monster, save. Ye Chen dodged, his father's martial arts needle pricked the ghost, the silver needle pricked the strong man's acupuncture point, his legs were weak and he knelt down, the second person's stick was swept away, he vomited blood with a muffled sound in his abdomen, and fainted after the carotid artery was pricked. Gu Sheng's eyes widened, and the legs of the chair trembled as he stepped back. You, monster. Detoxification. Household preparation. Impossible. Sweat mixed with poisonous mist, he rang the alarm bell frantically, his voice rising, Shen Qingqing is the mastermind. The professor sacrificed in the test, witnessed the third phase of K-17 approved by her, I only synthesize for profit, global pharma empire's black market has hundreds of millions, I don't know the details of the murder. 500,000 prepaid for the alliance's terror trade, the samples of politicians will arrive tonight. Ye Chen's lungs were on fire, and his vision was distorted and blood-red, but he gritted his teeth and sneered coldly, childish. Prepare. The sleeve needle pricked his arm, and the self-prepared detoxifying sodium nitrite surged through his blood vessels. The burning pain turned cold, and the phosphorus and fluoride were neutralized within the half-life. His eyes were as clear as a blade, and he fought back like a wolf. Gu Sheng's minions, two strong men in black rushed out, the iron rod whizzed and hit their heads, and the fishy wind blew against their faces. Su Wan and Han Zhao's remaining eyes widened, flashing in despair. Ye Chen is still moving after being poisoned. Their throats were tight and they were coughing blood, admiration and fear mixed together. Ye Chen pressed Gu Sheng's shoulder with his backhand and pricked the acupuncture point with the needle. His legs twitched and he knelt down, his face twisted like a ghost, self-destruction. Wing server. The detoxification needle quickly pricked Su Wan and Han Zhao's arm. The two women coughed up black phlegm, their vision gradually became clearer, and their lung heat subsided. Su Wan rushed forward, caressing Ye Chen's face with tears, and her fingertips trembled with heat. Ye Chen, the first shot to save himself from poisoning, his IQ crushed the aerosol. Gu Sheng's minions killed him instantly, you are a god. She hugged him tightly, her chest pressed against her arms and her arms were full of attachment, her breathing was rapid and numb. Han Xiao got up, the smell of lavender rekindled, and her pupils were wet with admiration, monster. The half-life of phosphorus and fluorine gases is your blind spot, vitamin C catalyzes neutralization. Han Xiaoyong follows. She stared at Gu Sheng, hatred flashing, Shen Qingqing uses Professor Li Zizhu, the Empire's shady story. Gu Sheng panted, his face turned pale, and before the security guards were approaching, he dropped a trembling whisper, data server, at the bottom of the underground laboratory, biological lock, Shen Qingqing's personal key. But you are late, the dignitary's convoy is half an hour away. He was dragged away, and his laughter echoed like a ghost's howl. The siren was like a beast tearing at metal, piercing the dead silence of the second underground floor. The red light flashed wildly at the end of the corridor, and the heavy leather boots thumped on the cement floor as they approached, causing gray dust to fall from the wall. The sour almond smell mixed with the residual fog penetrated the lungs. Su Wan still had black phlegm stuck in her throat. She coughed and bent over, and her hot tears splashed on the ground. She tugged on Ye Chen's sleeves, her fingertips as cold as dead hands. Security, gun. The dignitary's convoy has been sealed for half an hour, and the wing is sealed. Are we stuck on the second floor waiting to be slaughtered? Her voice shattered into shards of glass, her chest twitched and pressed her arms, her eyes widened and scanned the shadows, fear like ink-stained pupils. Han Zhao's legs slipped against the wall, and the lingering scent of lavender was drowned out by the sweat. She grabbed the laptop's blue light and her face turned pale and distorted. Her hand shook and she clicked on Gu Sheng's self-destruction recording. The loudspeaker echoed hoarsely, Shen Qingqing's personal key, the biometric lock buzzed. She swallowed, her Adam's apple rolled like a razor blade, and raised her voice staring at Ye Chen. The flame of admiration struggled in despair. Ye Chen, Gu Sheng broke the irrefutable evidence again, but the door buzzed on the third floor, and the heat source was a red dot thermal image of politicians. We are in the middle of the maze, trying to escape. Her gray eyes were moist, and her legs trembled and touched Ye Chen's knees, her enthusiasm mixed with panic. The sirens in the corridor were torn apart, the legs of the two women were limp against Ye Chen, the lingering rhymes of the poisonous fog were pungent, a new crisis was surging, the red dots of the heat source on the third underground floor were flashing wildly, the biological locks were buzzing and waiting to be activated, and the shadows of political figures were approaching like the scythe of death. Suppress. Ye Chen whispered like a sharpening knife, the silver needle pried open Gu Sheng and dropped the remains of the remote control shell, the circuit board sparkled, and the blue light scanned the code, the biometric lock password prompt, Shen Qingqing's personal key, Gu Sheng's confession, personally approved the third phase, the lowest heat source in the wing. His fingers were flying around the laptop, the home hacker module was used to crack the timestamp, the USB flash drive blueprint was superimposed on the infrared heat map, and the three-layer entrance was disguised as the ventilation duct behind the reagent cabinet. Gu Sheng remotely controlled the K-17 aerosol upgrade and extended the half-life. Shen Qingqing accelerated the meeting at 8 o'clock last night, under the ventilation duct, 20 meters directly to the biological lock. Ye Chen's eyes were like frozen knives, the burning pain of the poisonous mist had just subsided, and the coolness of the sodium nitrite in his blood was still there. He dragged the two women and rushed into the side door of the reagent warehouse. The door creaked shut, and the green liquid bottles inside reflected the faint blue. The air was as sticky as corpse water, and the transformer hummed faintly. The security guard's footsteps passed by the door, and the radio buzzed. "The kid is in the fog." Gu Sheng said that the servers on the third floor are sealed and the second floor is all swept. The muffled sound gradually faded away, and he let go. The two women sat slumped on the iron frame, breathing like a bellows. Han Xiao knelt down to pick up fragments of the green liquid. Her fingertips were red and swollen. She pressed the screen to compare the mass spectrum. Her voice shook like a broken candle. "It matches." Gu Sheng synthesized phosphorus and fluoride in 3 steps, but the peak value was 1650. He fine-tuned the gaseous state. He was making profits without knowing he had poisoned it with his own hands. Email link signed by Shen Qingqing of the fund. Professor She dealt with the witness's silence and logically ruled out Gu Sheng as the mastermind, but Shen Qingqing took action. But the security spy let him escape and dragged him away before the explosion. She looked up, her gray eyes flashing with admiration, and the back of Ye Chen's hand was numb with her hot breath. "Monster Ye Chen, the genealogy machine can instantly dissolve the aerosol, please take care of it." Su Wan's eyes widened with wet eyes, her mouth opened and closed, and her tears were not dry yet as she pointed at the hot spot of her laptop. "You counterattacked in the fog and hacked into the security frequency. The ventilation duct is as narrow as a coffin, and the dignitaries took half an hour." She hugged her knees and hugged her legs, her skirt was wet and cold, and her teeth rattled with fear. Li Zhe's diary said that there are 3 layers of pig cages, and the heartburn test is kept secret. "Let's get in and wait for the K-17 needle." The pipe mouth was pried open, and the air in the 3 underground layers exploded like a tomb. The cold air was filled with chemical acid and rushed directly to the forehead. The laboratory lamps were buzzing and flashing red. Steel cabinets were filled with test tubes and syringes. The surveillance cameras on the wall were staring at the red dots. The central server tower was buzzing with heat waves, and the blue light of the biological lock was pulsing like a heart. The list of victims is projected with afterimages. Li Zhe's third pig, the professor who witnessed his death, more than a dozen test subjects in the school pretending to have heart failure, K-17's massive data flashing, human body phase 3 political dignitaries sample preparation, global pharma's black market transfer chain worth hundreds of millions. Ye Chen snorted coldly. The electrolyte in his backpack splashed into the ventilation pipe, and the acid mist dissolved the rust. He got in first, and the narrow iron pipe scraped his skin and hurt him. Darkness swallowed his knees. The 2 women behind him pushed and followed. Su Wan's chest pressed against her back, and Han Zhao's legs jingled. There was mold and putrid rat droppings in the tube, dripping water splashed on the head like tears, and the red dot laptop positioning of the heat source was beating wildly. The biological lock was close at hand. The motorcade of dignitaries faintly roared and vibrated on the ground, and the half-hour countdown felt like a sickle pressing against the neck. Su-won crawled out of the first position, her pupils suddenly shrank and she screamed, "Lise!" Headline of the list. Shen Qingqing personally endorsed the third pig, and was forced to keep the signature secret. She threw herself at the server, tears smashed on the keyboard, her fists were swollen and red, and she banged on the cabinet. Ye Chen stabbed the circuit of the lock core, sparks flashed, the door opened with a buzzing sound, the server's heat wave hit his face and skin, he grabbed the USB flash drive and copied the data. His father's spectrometer was temporarily connected to the buzzing anti-drug bottle rack, a row of K-17 crystal bottles. The labels were blurry but the peak value was 1650, and the fingerprints on the bottom of the bottles were faintly exposed in ultraviolet light. Suddenly, the phone vibrated with an anonymous text message. Ye Chen was mentally disturbed and was caught secretly checking clothes in the library. The headline in the school newspaper was, "The madman in the Department of Chemistry thinks the professor is poisoned." There was a surveillance video of him smashing instruments and laughing wildly. The school's perjury trap was spread, and a dark cloud of public opinion prevailed. Su-won pounced on her cell phone, her face contorted like a ghost, tears streaming down her nose. Rumor. The principal suppressed the report. Shen Qingqing was manipulated by the evil spirit, and our hero turned into a madman. The campus forum exploded, and the students scolded Ye Chen for wanting to kill the professor. She bit her lip and bleeds, eyes burning with hatred, bravely dancing her fingers on the live broadcast app. "I am Su-won, Lise's girlfriend. Ye Chen save me," reveals the shady story. K-17 list evidence is broadcast live. Shen Qingqing is the mastermind. Global Pharma piggybacks on my boyfriend. The screen cuts to the server to project the victim list, and the campus public opinion barrage surges, shock, forwarding, and a flood of FBI requests for help, but the hackers counterattack and cut off the news, sirens rumbling on the ground as dignitaries' cars approach. Han Xiao slid out, the smell of lavender reappeared, she scanned the data with her fingers, her face turned green with sweat, the whole chain. Shen Qingqing's voice personally approved the professor's handling. Lise's diluent and Gu Xing forced him to drink it, but she monitored it. The logic is ironclad. Gu Xing made a profit, and she was the mastermind to personally inject the professor 1650 pieces of fingernail residue. 1400 fake reports were tampered with by the school. She turned to stare at Ye Chen's operation, her eyes filled with wet admiration. "Ye Chen, God. The blueprint is superimposed on the infrared. Your hacker has penetrated the biological lock pulse, the silver needle short-circuited the blue light. Decryption is in progress." Ye Chen's silver needle pricked the bottom of the bottle, and the electrolyte bubbled with sweetness and sourness to flush out the chemical smell in the nose. A home microscope magnified it 1,000 times, and the fingerprint spiral emerged clearly. Shen Qingqing's autograph matched the DNA soot iron evidence, and the peak 1650 phosphorus and fluorine crystals were microscopically attached, proving that she personally dispensed the needle to the professor. He sneered like a blade hook. The mastermind personally exposed the whole school and shocked the whole school. The two girls' eyes widened, and Su-won cried and touched the bottle. "God." The home instrument crushed the laboratory. The IQ surpassed Shen Qingqing's shady evidence, and the fingerprints are irrefutable evidence. Han Xiao came closer and breathed quickly, with gray eyes filled with heat. "Monster. Gu Sheng has been ruled out by logic, she personally approves and moves, and will always follow." Han Xiao assisted in copying the file, her legs trembled against the bottle rack, and her feet were hot with green liquid splashing. Public opinion reversed. Su-won bravely exposed the rumors. The forum turned against the school, but Shen Qingqing's biological lock backup was transferred, and the original blueprint flew away. She's staring at Ye Chen's poison bottle under the microscope. His voice broke out in admiration. "Ye Chen, GP cigarette but upgrade method, UV electrolyte floating fingerprints." Shen Qingqing's 3.8 cm high heels matched the indentation, and I personally dipped the K-17 bottle. The data was copied, the USB flash drive was hot, the dignitary's car roared and dust fell from the wall, the biological lock was restarted and the red light flashed wildly, and the footsteps outside the door were as dense as the army of death. Su-won hugged Ye Chen's waist and pressed her fingertips against numbness on his back. There is a surge of public opinion, but we are stuck on the third floor and the escape route is blocked. Han Xiao grabbed his arm and felt lavender in his nose. Leader Ye Chen, unlock the exit. The cold wind at the end of the iron pipe scratched his face like a ghost's claws. Ye Chen's knees were exploring the wild grass, and the night dew was icy on the skin. He pulled Su-won's waist and turned it out, and the mud splashed on the soles of her shoes. The wilderness outside the abandoned factory wing in the eastern suburbs was as black as ink. In the distance, the black cars of dignitaries rumbled on the gravel road. The headlights swept like the pupils of beasts, and the engine roar shook the chest. Han Xiao finally slipped down, the scent of lavender mixed with mud and rot hit her nose. Her legs felt weak and hit Ye Chen's back. Hot breath sprayed on his neck and itched. Ye Chen, the 3-tier server has been fully copied to the USB flash drive, but the K-17 bottle rack is empty. The surveillance red dot finally scanned the bottle shadow and shifted. Shen Qingqing's internal ghost backup was transferred, and the dignitary car sealed the wing for 5 minutes. We exposed the heat source. Su-won hugged her knees and squatted on the ground, her tear-stained face twisted like a ghost, her skirt was wet and sticky to her legs, cold, her fingers trembled as she poked at her mobile phone to live broadcast the residual message, and the hacker's barrage was still exploding. Crazy Ye Chen's photos. But Su-won's evidence. Shen Qingqing pig lise. She looked up and stared at Ye Chen, her pupils wet with admiration. Exploded, the voice shattered like shards of glass. God. Your family's spectrum revealed irrefutable evidence of her fingerprints, and the live broadcast reversed the campus fire, but the bottle disappeared. New poison political needle. Are we stuck in the wilderness, waiting for a black car to run over? Fear overwhelmed her, her chest spasmed and she pressed her arms, her teeth rattled, and her hot tears splashed on the grass and splashed in the mud. Ye Chen's mind was like circuits flashing wildly, the USB flash drive was hot in his pocket, and Shen Qingqing's fingerprints were at the peak of 1650 to prove the iron chain, but the last frame of the bottle shift monitoring, the blueprint overlay heat map showed the heat source pulsating in the old warehouse outside the wing. Gu Xing confessed, the wing is located in the eastern suburbs, and Shen Qingqing's transfer is accelerating. The psychological game is like a knife, rushing straight to the warehouse. The probability of the dignitary's car being blocked is 99%, but the residual agent in the bottle may be the dignitary's sample, which is the final irrefutable proof. If you miss the black market transaction, you will be trapped in the dark net forever. Separately, the hacker Han Xiao pokes at the school transfer and verifies Global Pharma's hundreds of millions of chains, but her legs are weak and panicked. Su-won's live broadcast is cut off and the risk of public opinion counterattack soars. Gritting his teeth with a sneer, he whispered like poisonous mist, the hook. The bottle is Shen Qingqing's escape route. We chase the warehouse and split up to fight back. Han Xiao, the school administrator, transfers the irrefutable evidence. Su-won and I sneak in, and Gu Xing kills him alive. The dignitaries are driven by the car, and the smoke escapes. Han Xiao's gray eyes widened, her mouth opened in an O shape and she couldn't close it. She grabbed Ye Chen's arm and the nails were dug into the flesh. She swallowed saliva and her Adam's apple rolled like a needle. Monster. The 3-layer biological lock silver needle is short-circuited and can be broken in seconds. Now let's separate. I'm a hacker poking into Shen Qingqing's mailbox darknet. The flame of admiration burned wildly in panic, and her knees were trembling with heat, and the lavender was tangy in her nose mixed with sore sweat. She clicked on the laptop's blue light and her face was pale and distorted. Follow the leader's orders, use a home module VPN to circumvent the campus ghosts, but the warehouse security has thermal imaging. Her voice shook like a candle, but she knelt down and pointed at the keyboard. The Wi-Fi signal was as weak as a flickering will-o'-the-wisp. He scanned blueprints, used a silver needle to pry the back door for ventilation, dragged two girls out in the heat wave, the iron pipe scraped off the smell of flesh and blood mixed with acid mist, the ground rumbled and the shadows of black cars of political figures loomed over the wilderness, the distant campus lights and public opinion skyrocketed, but in the laboratory, a bottle of K-17 poison sat empty on the shelf and suddenly disappeared, the surveillance red dot stared like a ghost's eye. A new crisis was surging, and Shenqingqing's shadow was like a black cloud forever. Ye Chen's silver acupuncture pricked the electrolytic bottle in his backpack, the sodium nitrite residual liquid was splashed on the grass and the acid mist rose. The white smoke filled the moon like corpse air, the headlights of the dignitaries' cars pierced the fog and distorted the red shadow. He dragged the two women into the bushes, the thorns scraped the skin and the smell of blood hit his nostrils, and the wild rats shrieked and crashed into the car. Psychological Cold War. Shenqingqing transferred the bottle, the backup server flew away, and he misjudged that Gu Sheng was the mastermind or she was the decoy, but the fingerprint and DNA proved it with his own hands. The global pharma black market buyer had an 87% chance of trading tonight, and missed the entire link. Roaring, Han Xiaoshu is behind the scenes, locate the warehouse and send me the coordinates. Su Wan is pretending to be interviewing, wearing a syringe for K-17 neutralization. He tore off his clothes and wrapped his head, smeared his face with plaster as a ghost, and took the lead to rush forward low in the grass waves. The dignitary's car rumbled against him, and the heat wave burned his back like a tongue of fire. Han Xiao paralyzed the roots of the tree, the blue light of the laptop buzzed and filled her eyes with tears. Her fingers danced wildly to crack the school firewall, and sweat rolled down the keyboard. Ye Chen. VPN bypassed the Ghost ID, Shenqingqing's mailbox secret compartment, transfer. Global Pharma _rep dark network 500,000 prepaid, hundreds of millions of political dignitary samples K-17 3 issues. After the meeting at 8 o'clock last night, I moved to number 4, the eastern suburbs warehouse, and the buyer's hot spot is 10 o'clock tonight. Her voice burst out with admiration, and her gray eyes glanced at Ye Chen's back with excitement. God. Split the plan, confirm the transfer and confirm her signature. I backed up the dark network anonymous forum. The fear of the legs trembled against the tree trunk, but the scent of lavender was firm. Ye Chen and Su Wan crawled on the grass, the abandoned factory wing towered black like a tomb, the cracks in the warehouse door leaked yellow light and blood red, the smell of rust and chemical acid penetrated into the lungs, Gu Sheng's hoarse roar echoed in the distance. Shenqingqing. You needle professor with your own hands, I can't destroy the fingerprint bottle. I'll take 500,000 from Global Pharma's hundreds of millions, and all the gangsters know about it. Ye Chen's heart beat like a hammer, and his mind was racing. Gu Sheng obeyed orders again, threatened to expose Shenqingqing's plan, and mistakenly believed in his mastermind. However, the server projected Li Zizhu's handwritten annotation and fingerprint 1650's handwriting, and Gu Shengsheng made profits without knowing it. The logical exclusion rate was 72%, but the coordinates of the confession wing were consistent, decoy for infighting. Su Wan put her ears to the ground, her face contorted and bursting into tears. Gu Sheng, expose Shenqingqing himself again. But Li Zai's diary forced him to drink, so we sneaked in to record. Her breasts were hot with the grass, and she stared at Ye Chen with admiration. Ye Chen is a monster, a household hacker who escaped from the fog, and heard the ironclad evidence of the dispute. Ye Chen narrowed his eyes coldly, and the silver needle pried open the wire mesh of the warehouse side window and creaked. The electrolyte droplets rusted and melted into the hole, and he got in first. The air inside was as sticky as corpse water, the shelves were filled with syringe crystal bottles reflecting the faint green, the K-17 poison bottles on the central iron table flickered with blurred labels, the peak 1650 afterglow was faint, Shenqingqing's high heels made 3.8 centimeters indentations in the fresh soil, and cigarette butts GP ashes were scattered. The door slammed open, Shenqingqing's gentle face twisted like a snake, the lingering fragrance of lavender in the silk shirt filled her nostrils, she scratched Gu Sheng's collar, her nails were dug into the flesh and bloodshot. Shut up. Gu Sheng, you are making a profit to synthesize K-17, the professor witnessed me handling it, Lise kept it secret, if you hit the black market worth hundreds of millions, I will kill your whole family. Gu Xing's legs were weak and he knelt down, his face was green and sweaty, and his eyes were red with ambition. You approve the key biolock to accelerate the third phase of the fund. You take the lead in the global pharma empire. I threaten to expose the whole plan. Ye Chen, kid, copy the server. Handle the fingerprint bottle with your own hands. I will use the evidence in exchange for my life. He pointed at the K-17 bottle with trembling hands. Under the ultraviolet light on the bottle, the fingerprints spirally floated on the DNA iron evidence, and the sweet and sour air washed away the chemical corrosion. Su Wan pounced on Ye Chen's chest, her waist was hot and pressed against her abdomen, and her nose was wet with tears. Ye Chen, the warehouse. Lise's diary mentioned the abandoned factory in the east suburbs. Shen Qingqing took the lead in the pig farm, but the black car headlights swept over. Her ears were pressed to the ground, rumbling. Long's ears were ringing like death drums, his pupils were dyed with fear, but his eyes were filled with a wave of admiration. God's leader. Kill the enemy in the mist and crush them with instruments. Sneak in and you and I will fight even if the live broadcast is interrupted. The finger scratches on the back are numb, bravery burns with despair. Ye Chen's brain is spinning wildly, and he is having a secret psychological battle, a dispute over live broadcast or recording. Gu Xing threatens to expose the entire plan, and the probability of misjudgment of his mastermind increases by 85%. However, Shen Qingqing flashes the murderous intention with her own hands, and GP cigarette but upgrades to forensic analysis, and the logic is pieced together. Gu Xing obeys the order and synthesizes it, and her sponsor takes the lead to personally kill the person, and breaks the chain of evidence through internal fighting. His mobile phone was muted and recorded, and the camera caught Gu Xing yelling, "Copy the whole server of the wing, you wrote Lise's third pig, and the black market for the sample of the dignitary's car tonight is worth hundreds of millions." Shen Qingqing slapped Gu Xing across the face, and bloodshot eyes spattered. The little kid Ye Chen is insane and has a picture of the school newspaper. Public opinion is overwhelming him. Suddenly, the red light of the warehouse surveillance flashed wildly, and the security radio was approaching. Heat source warehouse number 4, sealed. After Ye Chen dragged Su Wan away from the shelf, the electrolyte was poured on the K-17 bottle of Golu, and the bubbling acid mist rose. The white smoke filled the air like a ghost hitting his face. His silver needle stabbed the window lock core and sparks exploded. The two of them pulled out of the iron net and scraped their skin bloody. The thorns in the wilderness pricked their flesh and hurt. The headlights of politicians' cars burned their backs. Su Wan gasped and pulled the bellows, punched Ye Chen's waist and scratched her back. Her chest was tingling with tears. It's recorded. Gu Xing threatened her with all the plans and mistakenly believed in his mastermind. Shen Qingqing personally admitted the deal and silenced Professor Lise. Her adoring eyes were filled with moisture. Ye Chen's IQ is top-notch, and God arranged to split up and kill the warehouse to record the evidence. Su Wan had phlegm stuck in her throat, her eyes widened with wet eyes and her mouth opened wide. Hot tears hit the shelves and made jingling noises. She tugged on Ye Chen's sleeves, her fingertips as cold as death. Shen Qingqing personally admitted to dealing with the professor. Gu Xing threatened to expose her as the mastermind. Li Zizhu is convinced, but the security is approaching. His legs were shaking with fear, his chest was trembling, his teeth were rattling, and he stared at Ye Chen with burning admiration and despair. Sneak in to record the evidence. Are you ready for the syringe? Ye Chen snorted while sharpening his knife. The wind in the wilderness mixed with the dazzling acid mist. The three of them lay in the grass and gasped for breath. The ending of the psychological game, a trap of wrong reasoning. Gu Xing threatened all plans to lure him into being the mastermind. Shen Qingqing personally fingerprinted the master of the entire transfer chain. The dignitary's car rumbled around the wing for testing, and the new crisis black market buyer did not show up. But the cell phone vibrated, and the anonymous envelope slipped away, an invitation letter written by Shen Qingqing, with squirming ink like blood. Genius Ye Chen, attend the Truth meeting, on the top floor of the Eastern Suburbs warehouse, at 11 o'clock tonight. Bring a USB flash drive, otherwise global pharma dignitary samples will be used to target your whole family. The hook shone coldly like a sickle, the lights of the abandoned factory pulsed blood red, the night wind was filled with ghosts crying and wolves howling, and a new situation was undercurrent. Su-won trembled as she threw the letter, while Han Zhao's gray eyes were filled with heat, and they burst into admiration. Ye Chen, she hooked her, and we killed the meeting. His eyes flashed with ice, and the silver needle turned with a cold light between his fingers. The wind in the wilderness is like ghost claws tearing at the corners of clothes, and the residual fragrance of acid mist is pungent and mixed with blood. Ye Chen's invitation with a silver needle is crawling with ink, and the handwriting is like blood pulsing. Truth meeting, 11 o'clock on the top floor of the warehouse, bring a USB flash drive or else the whole family will get injections. Su-won knelt down on the grass and mud, her tears splashing down the letter, and she poked the edge of the paper with trembling fingers, her fingernails dug into the flesh with white marks, her breasts convulsed and pressed her knees, her teeth chattering. Ye Chen, trap. Shen Qingqing's autographed hook, the car of dignitaries rumbled around the wing, the black market buyer's heat source pulsated, our 3 heat sources were swept away by security, and the USB flash drive was copied to the 3rd level. The ghost inside her server is backing up, and she's flying to the dark web. Her eyes were stained with ink, and her legs were soft and muddy. She pulled Ye Chen's pants tightly and burned them, worshipping the flames and struggling in despair. God's leader, counterattack. 3 doses of K-17 aerosol are prepared in a syringe, but the top iron door is locked by the biological key. Are we stuck? Han Zhao's gray eyes were as round as copper bells, her mouth was O-shaped and her Adam's apple was rolling down her throat. She held a pen and trembled her leg against Ye Chen's knee, and her nose was filled with lavender sweat. Monster. Warehouse number 4 infighting video transfer iron evidence forum bombing the school. Shen Qingqing slapped Gu Xing in the face to admit silence, but the thermal imaging tracking of the invitation, we have a 99% chance of hooking the dignitaries and targeting the whole family. She poked the screen with her finger, the blue light reflected on the face was pale and distorted, and the forum barrages flashed wildly. Ye Chen's P-picture madman's reversal. Shen Qingqing's evidence has surfaced. A wave of admiration surged into his eyes, and his voice broke into pieces of glass. The leaders split up and started planning again. I hacked the security channel to delay the heat source, but the top-level server's ultimate data disk GP was fully linked. She faked and cleared the suspicion. Gu Xing knelt down and threatened to expose the whole plan. Are we going to die? Ye Chen's brain flashed like lightning, and the psychological game was twisted. The invitation letter was a direct hit. Shen Qingqing misjudged the vulnerability of the full copy of the USB flash drive, and fake evidence cleared up the infighting video transfer, but the top-level biometric lock was upgraded, and the black market buyer of the dignitary's car was close to the 10-point hotspot. If he missed the final disk, the entire school's high-level links would be forever broken. He narrowed his cold eyes and grinded his teeth, and growled at the poisonous mist. The hook will kill you. On the top floor, she pretended to reconcile with me and poked holes in the toxicology demonstration, with fingerprints of 1650 peak GP and cigarette but DNA for ironclad evidence. Han Xiaohei's security delayed the response from behind the tree. Su-won belted a syringe. The live broadcast was cut off and the interview was followed up in disguise. He tore off his clothes, wrapped his head in plaster and smeared his face with ghosts, stabbed the electrolyte bottle in his backpack with silver needles, prepared 3 doses of sodium nitrite to neutralize K-17, put a USB flash drive in his pocket to soothe his heart, and rushed forward low in the grass. The thorns scraped his skin and the blood was boiling. Su-won had phlegm stuck in her throat, her eyes widened with wet eyes and she burst into the mud with tears. She hit Ye Chen's back and waist with hot pressure, and his back was numb. The hem of his skirt was wet and sticky, and his legs were cold and burning bravely. I obey God. I broke my belt and syringe during the live broadcast, and Gu Xing broke into another internal fight and recorded her autograph. Han Xiao was paralyzed and the roots of the tree were flying and the keyboard buzzed. and the Wi-Fi ghost fire flashed. Maintaining the frequency of heat source delayed by 5 minutes, false positive birds, gray eyes scanned Ye Chen's back and worshipped, legs trembling with heat, it's over. The top floor elevator code 1237 biometric key backup, but the final disk encrypts the entire global pharma empire. The voice shook, and the lavender blew firmly into the wind. In the wing of the abandoned factory stands a shadowy tomb, the rusty stairs creak like broken bones. Ye Chen Su-1 crawls up to the top floor against the wall, the air is sticky and sweet and sour, the corpse water rushes into the lungs, the engine of the dignitary's car rumbles in the distance, the god of death puffs up his chest, and the beast eyes of the headlight sweep away the fog and distort the red shadow. The iron door on the top floor of the warehouse is ajar, with yellow light leaking, blood red and chemical rot. The cracks in the door are fresh and wet, and there are 3.8 centimeters new marks on the door, and the ashes of GP cigarette butts are scattered and gleaming with ultraviolet poison. Ye Chen used the silver needle to pry the lock cylinder, sparks exploded and creaked. He dodged in first. The inside was as wide as a slaughterhouse. The central iron table was piled with a fake report peak value of 1400. The K-17 crystal syringe reflected a faint green color. The blue light of the ultimate data disk in the corner was pulsating and hot. The surveillance red dot was slowly scanning without warning. Shen Qingqing leaned on the table and smiled as warmly as a snake. The lingering fragrance of lavender in her silk shirt hit her nostrils. She tapped the fake report with her fingers, and her voice was filled with honey. Ye Chen is a genius, you came on time. The 3-layer copy of the U-disk was copied by my inner ghost and flew away. Gu Xing made a profit and synthesized the K-17 ambitious ghost. Professor Li Zhe witnessed him forcefully drink. I will clear away the suspicion. Look, the peak value of the report is 1,400 for conventional phosphorus and 1,650 for floating fingerprints. Your home picture is insane, and the school newspaper and public opinion will crush you to death. She flicked the fake evidence and the pages fell, her eyes flashed with murderous intentions, the cigarette ash flickered on the table, and the sweet and sour air was like a ghost's breath. Han Xiaoshu sprang out from behind, holding her laptop and running with trembling legs. The smell of lavender mixed with mud filled her nostrils. She stuffed a USB flash drive with ironclad evidence of transfer. The school affairs are over. Shen Qingqing transfers 500,000 GP on the dark web. The hot source of buyer number 4 in the warehouse. Tonight, the forum pushed anonymous backup, public opinion reversed again. The FBI barrage exploded. She stared at the video, her gray eyes widened with admiration, and she grabbed Ye Chen's arm with warmth. Monster leader. Gu Xing threatened to expose her plan again, and transferred money to the sponsor, but you misunderstood Gu Xing. The logic is ironclad. Shen Qingqing's hand. Ye Chen snorted and gritted his teeth in silence, his mind secretly fighting like electricity. The fake report 1400 was tampered with the half-life misalignment, the professor's nail fluorophosphorus peak 1650 matched K-17's third-phase political leader. She personally adjusted the UV floating spiral of the cigarette but DNA. He walked forward slowly, took out the hot USB flash drive in his pocket and threw it on the table. The silver acupuncture stabbed the backpack, household spectrometer, dripped the electrolyte bottle, and the residue at the bottom was sizzling. The sodium nitrite catalyzed neutralization aerosol filled the white mist. He said, Secretary Shen, reconciliation. Demonstration of toxicology, you fake 1400 phosphorus agent, half-life of 60 minutes, my father's instrument. The professor's fingernails were replaced with 1650 fluorine by ultraviolet rays, and the nerve poison was used to disguise the heart failure. Li Zhe's almond mask covered the crystal structure and matched it. His finger poked at the screen and a blue light flashed. The peak curve soared to 1650, which was an ironclad proof. The electrolyte splashed on the fake report page dissolved the ink and exposed the underlying forgery marks. The acid mist in the air irritated the eyes and choked the lungs. Su-1 hid behind the door, her throat choked with sobs, her wet eyes wide open and her mouth open with tears falling to the ground. She pulled Ye Chen's sleeves and her fingertips were frozen to death, her chest trembled violently, her arms and teeth clucked. Fake. Peak 1650 Professor Nail K. 17 fluoride to prove it, she forged a 1,400 yuan loophole, and transferred 500,000 GP to silence her. Her legs slid against the wall in fear, and she stared at Ye Chen with admiration. God exposed it. The live broadcast is closed, but the syringe in the belt is ready. Shen Qingqing's gentle face was twisted with snake scales, her gray eyes were as round as copper bells, her mouth was O-shaped, she staggered back, her high heels clicked on the ground, her fingers trembled as she scratched the edge of the table, her nails dug into the wood and the cigarette ashes scattered, and the gray mist rose. Impossible. You use a broken instrument at home. I don't know if Gu Xing synthesized the peak position, but Global Pharma paid him 500,000 in advance to make a profit. His voice shook like a candle, hot sweat rolled down his cheeks and splashed on the table, his lavender-scented clip collapsed, and his pupils were stained red with despair. Suddenly the door crashed, Gu Xingji's face was ashen with sweat, the K-17 crystal in the syringe was shining green, his legs were weak, he rushed in and roared hoarsely, Shen Qingqing. You personally signed the fund and injected the professor with your own hands, Li Zai's third pig. I synthesized it according to orders, but I didn't know how to adjust it personally. You personally copied the key to the biological lock on the third floor of the wing. The whole plan was exposed, the billion-dollar black market global pharma empire. I exchanged the evidence for my life. I have a copy of the list of the whole school's senior officials. He threw the syringe and hit the table. The crystal rolled to the ground and reflected blood red. He stabbed Shen Qingqing's collar on his back, and his fingertips were dug into the flesh and bloodshot, and he was fighting like a wolf. Su Wan's throat was stuck and she screamed, her eyes widened with admiration and she burst into tears. She threw herself out of the door and pressed her breasts against Ye Chen's arms. God crushed me. She used the household spectrum to poke holes in the forgery, and personally handed over the 1650 fluoride certificate. She transferred the money to the GP warehouse and admitted to being silenced. Her legs were soft and she knelt down bravely, her belt syringe tightened and numb. Shen Qingqing swung her body and hit Gu Xing with a back elbow and slapped her nose with blood. She grabbed the blue light of the ultimate data disk and pressed it into her arms. She kicked Gu Xing's knees with high heels until the bones were broken. He knelt down and wailed and twisted, chess piece. Gu Xing, you made a profit of 500,000 yuan. The professor witnessed me. Clean it up, you don't know what's going on in the black market for 3-stage needle samples for politicians. A melee broke out, the syringe aerosol sprayed sour and sweet mist into the face and choked the lungs, the shelves tipped over and hit the iron rusty smell, and the security radio buzzed close to the top-level heat source blockade. Ye Chen's silver needle flashed with cold light and he spun around, psychological lightning flashed, Gu Xing's chess piece self-destructed and rebelled, Shen Qingqing, the mastermind, personally signed the whole chain of needles, and the ultimate blue light pulsed to win it. The electrolyte on the low-lying shelf was splashed with mist and white corpse gas blinded her eyes. The thorns tore the copy of the USB flash drive into Gu Xing's pocket and burned it. Shen Qingqing's abdomen was hot and painful with a knee. She groaned and threw the main disk to the ground. He grabbed the blue light iron certificate and decrypted the 1650 broken bottles with UV floating spiral locks. The screen flashed with a list of the school's senior officials, the principal signed the sponsorship, more than a dozen test subjects disguised as having heart failure, and the Global Pharma 500 million list of dignitaries in the underground wing. Han Xiao rushed under the tree, her legs trembling with lavender to save Su Wan. She threw herself over her waist and wrapped it with heat. The sodium nitrite needle pricked Su Wan's arm and neutralized the residual mist. Sister, hold on. The black security is delayed by 3 minutes. I'm a VPN trap. His gray eyes widened in admiration. He sprayed hot breath on Su Wan's neck and felt itchy. He grabbed the syringe and sprayed it back on Gu Xing's face. He convulsed and fell to the ground, foaming at the mouth. Su Wan and Han Xiao pounced on Ye Chen, his chest, waist and limbs were numb from the heat, and their hot tears smashed against the plate and splashed with blue light. Their eyes were wide and moist, and their mouths couldn't close. They worshipped the volcano, god Ye Chen. The toxicology demonstration was used to crush the forgery. Gu Xing stabbed the chess piece in the back to prove that the mastermind was the mastermind, and the whole school was shocked by the final list of high-ranking officials. Su Wan's chest convulsed and her arms were hot. Hot, the IQ is over the top, the anti-killing meeting is the ironclad proof, she escapes but the full picture of the global pharma empire is exposed. Han Zhao's gray eyes wrapped around her fingertips and pulsated, and her voice broke with admiration, monster leader. The forum promotes high-level links, the FBI's black market buyers are hot, but the copy of the dark network, the new crisis campus is completely shady. Shen Qingqing's gentle face was contorted, her bloodshot lips were biting white, she swung her high heel and hit Ye Chen's forehead, causing blood to flow from her eyes, and her high heel knocked on the ground and ran through the crack of the door. Monster Ye Chen. A copy of the data disk is flying on the dark network, and the higher-ups know all about your evidence and cannot suppress it. Her figure melted into the mist and escaped, her high heel echoed the ghost's cry, and the headlights of the dignitary's car rumbled across the top floor and the red shadow burned her back. The security boots thumped like war drums on the iron steps, the infrared heat swept the red net flashing wildly on the top of the wing, the engine of the dignitary's car roared as it approached the fog, and the headlights' bloody eyes tore through the darkness of the night and stabbed ice needles into the backs of the three of them. Gu Xing was convulsed and twisted like a puppet with strings cut off, foaming at the mouth, and Golu's mixed-race silk was dripping and snapping on the floor. The sweet and sour corpse smell of K-17 aerosol permeated his lungs, the Blu-ray data disc was hot and the pulse in Ye Chen's palm was beating wildly, and the portrait of the principal on the high-level list flashed iron evidence. He growled, grinding his teeth, and the silver needle shone with cold light, whirled around, tore off the iron sheet of the shelf, smashed the door, and the electrolyte sprayed the white corpse, and the gas exploded, blinding his eyes. Su Wan had a fishbone stuck in her throat, her eyes were round with wet eyes, and the blue light was splashing on the plate. She dragged Ye Chen's arms and chest, spasming and scratching her back with heat, and her skirt was wet and sticky. Her legs were shaking and she was bravely burning. God. The security officials sealed the wing, and the data was encrypted with a 3-layer global pharma quantum lock. Her copy was dark. Netflix, the whole school's top management reported that our 3 heat sources have a 100% chance of killing us. The fear ink stained the eyes and the legs slid down the wall, and the flames of worship burned around the waist. The live broadcast was cut off and my belt was neutralized, but Gu Xing faked his death and delayed. The new crisis black market buyer heat source. Han Zhao's gray eyes opened, her mouth opened, her Adam's apple rolled with a pin, she pounced on Su Wan, overwhelming the lavender, sweating and tangy, and mixed with corpses. Her laptop buzzed, Wi-Fi will-o'-the-wisp flashed, and the security frequency was delayed. False positive, the flock of birds spread 5 points to escape the window, monster leader. I can't hack the ultimate quantum lock, Shen Qingqing's biometric fingerprint upgrade, the ghost in the forum school has pushed, Ye Chen's picture is crazy, Gu Sheng was murdered in the sub-warehouse and the public opinion was overwhelming. Before the list of senior officials was exposed, our whole family was injected. He poked his fingers at the blue light on the screen and his face turned pale and distorted. He admired the heat wave and heard the sound of broken glass. They split up and ran around the heat source number 4 of the old warehouse outside the ventilation duct to avoid the politicians. My VPN was used to trick Gu Xing into fighting, but the dark network copy is like a sickle, the fish is dead and the network is broken. Ye Chen's brainstorming lightning network flashes psychological game knife twisting, security heat sweeps the quantum lock upgrade hook, Shen Qingqing's escaped copy of the dark network ironclad link is broken, Gu Xing's chess piece convulses and feigns death to drag security. But in the end the full picture of the high-level principal signed to sponsor more than 10 pigs with heart failure to pretend to be Global Pharma's 500 million dignitary list. He squinted coldly and tore off his clothes, wrapped his head in plaster and smeared his face with ghosts. The silver needle pricked the interface and the electrolyte catalyzed the floating Shenqingqing fingerprints. The spiral ultraviolet explosion flashed. The iron pipes on the shelves above his knees jingled to cover his footsteps. The low-voltage mist channeled the rusty ventilation ducts and scraped the skin with blood. Anti-killing exposure. Han Zhao's black media FBI hotline promoted the forum, and Su Wan's school organized a parade. Pressure to Live broadcast the list of senior officials. My father used a spectrometer to crack the quantum lock to poke the coordinates of the mansion where Shenqingqing was hiding. Gu Xing faked his death and forged a silver needle to test his vitality. The three people crawled with tubes and splashed mud, the heads of dignitaries roared and echoed with ghost cries, the wilderness wind ghost claws ripped out the back and the cold blade came out of the old warehouse. Number 4 thermal source residual poison bottle was stung by the broken glass and stung my feet. In front of the campus laboratory building in gray fog at dawn, the school newspaper's big screen flashed. Ye Chen was mentally disturbed and Gu Xing was murdered in the warehouse. The school is investigating the non-toxicity of K-17 conventional phosphorus agent. Passers-by and doctoral students gathered around and whispered sarcastically, "Genius?" A lunatic with household equipment silenced himself. Shen the secretary gently clarified the irrefutable evidence of the peak value of 1,400, and the principal pressed for justice. Ye Chen and the other three ghosts rushed into Han Zhao's dormitory. The air was filled with the residual fragrance of lavender, the blue light of the ultimate disc pulsated and the laptop buzzed, and the red screen of the quantum lock flashed, biological fingerprint unpaired self-destruct mode. Ye Chen's cold eyes grinded his teeth, the data disk was hot in his palms, the high-level list flashed with the principal's portrait as irrefutable evidence, the ending of the psychological game. Shenqingqing's leader escaped and the hook was broken. Gu Xing's chess piece twitched and was waiting to be arrested, but the political dignitary's car wing tested the pulse, and the whole school conspired to expand the dark network copy like a sickle. The wind in the wilderness is howling, the iron gate is creaking, the security guards are pounding, the three people's faces are blood red and pulsing in the blue light, and the new situation is like a tide of corpses. Han Zhao's gray eyes were as wide as a bell, her mouth was O-shaped and she swallowed. She crossed her legs and bumped against the table. Her nose burst with sweat, and her fingertips flew wildly on the keyboard. Wi-Fi ghost fire, quantum lock Shenqingqing's personal fingerprint GP cigarette but DNA match failed, Gu Xing's false suicide, the security recommended Ye Chen is a drug addict, forum school. The long statement of normal toxicology research in the laboratory crushed the public opinion, and our three heat sources are wanted by the whole school. The voice shook, and the sweat rolled down the cheeks, and the admiration filled the eyes. The leader used it to strengthen the mass spectrometry to reproduce the 3 steps of phosphorus and fluoride, but he was hiding in the encryption layer of the coordinates of the mansion East Lake Villa. Ye Chen snorted and gritted his teeth, mentally fighting lightning. The school perjured Gu Xing's fake death, public opinion supported the hook, the quantum lock fingerprint vulnerability, cigarette butts, ultraviolet floating Shenqingqing spiral household catalysis. But before the high-level list was exposed, the black market for security politicians expanded. He slowly stepped forward and took out his father's spectrometer, dripping electrolyte and sizzling it. The silver needle pricked the disc core and sparks exploded with blue light flashing wildly. The sodium nitrite catalyzed floating fingerprint matched the peak value of 1650 fluorine to replace the iron evidence. Vitamin C neutralized the residual poison aerosol and the white mist blew. The whole screen exploded. Shenqingqing personally signed the fund transfer K-17 project. Gu Xingsheng, Global Pharma's 500 million dignitary list in the underground wing of more than a dozen school pigs pretending to be heart failure. Professor Lizet silenced the video, and high-level principals signed funding conference speeches, accelerating the black market to reach 100 million. Su Wan burst into tears and splashed water on the keyboard. Her eyes widened with wet eyes, her legs were soft and she knelt on the ground. Her breasts trembled and pressed against Ye Chen's knees. God is desperate. The forum of the school's insiders is blasting us for murdering Gu Xing. Students don't believe that the probability of marching is 0%, Su Wan said. The media FBI hotline blocks the "no evidence" Shen Qingqing's copy of the dark network, and there is no way to expose the high-level list. He poked at the phone with trembling fingers, and scratched his waist with admiration, but my father's spectrometer is a miracle. The door of the dormitory was smashed, and the shadow of the security guard broke into the black hole of the gun and grinned ferociously. Ye Chen is a wanted criminal. The data disk self-destructed. Gu Xing's body K-17, you poisoned me, the principal ordered me to silence you on the spot. The passers-by, doctoral students, gathered around and stared at the thieves, panicking, retreating from the wall and stomping around. The smell of air gun oil was as heavy as a ghost's breath. Su Wan screamed, her throat stuck, her eyes wide with admiration, and she burst into tears. She hit Ye Chen's chest, waist and limbs with hot pressure and scratched his back to numbness. She clenched the syringe of the live broadcast belt and said bravely and passionately, "Impossible. The household spectrum is used to crush the quantum lock to reveal the fingerprints. The top list of Shen Qingqing and the mastermind's autographs and injections are all exposed." Her legs were weak and she knelt down, her chest spasming and burning. Han Zhao's gray eyes burst into flames and her mouth couldn't be closed. She pushed the VPN forum with her fingers and flashed. Ye Chen cracked the ultimate disk. Principal signed to fund Global Pharma's 500 million pig chain. She sprayed hot breath on Ye Chen's neck and itched lavender firmly. Monster. The mass spectrometry enhanced phosphorus and fluorine path Gu Xing platform has irrefutable evidence. The East Lake Mansion coordinates were decrypted and Shen Qingqing's heat source was pulsating in the live broadcast. The security insider was exposed. The parade organized by Su Wan in the school gate square exploded like a volcano. Thousands of students waved torches and flashed ghosts and shouted, "The truth has been revealed." Shen Qingqing steps down as principal and resigns. The barrage on the big screen forum was red and red. Ye Chen's IQ is the highest in the final list of high-level officials. It is irrefutable evidence that Global Pharma's black market is terrifying. Media reporters swarmed with microphones and poked Ye Chen in the face. Flashes of light were dazzling and choked his nose. Ye Chen threw the copy of the USB flash drive and smashed it on the table. The blue light of the home spectrometer flashed with a peak value of 1650 to demonstrate that the professor's fingernail fluoride replaced the half-life of 30 distractions. The black shadow of the security guard retreated with his gun trembling, his face distorted by snake scales, his mouth was O-shaped, his throat was rolled with Adam's apple, and his fingertips dug into the handle of the gun and creaked. Fake. The quantum lock is broken at home. The principal signed the sponsorship. Do we obey Shen Qingqing? Hot sweat rolled down his forehead in panic. PhD students who walked out of the door and bumped into passers-by fell to the ground and howled wildly. They stared at Ye Chen's ghostly back with admiration and knelt down in admiration. Genius. Household equipment crushes high-level conspiracy, and K-17 is illegally produced for profit. The whole chain of heart failure in pigs on campus is exposed. The reporter's fat man's round eyes bulged, his mouth was O-shaped, his head tilted backwards and trembled. Crack the quantum lock at home. Shen Qingqing personally signed K-17 to acupuncture more than 10 pigs to make hundreds of millions of profits. The school perjured Gu Xing's suicide, his pulse was alive, and the security guard escorted the witness to stab him in the back. Sweat rolled down his cheeks, his legs were burning with admiration, and he knelt down softly. Magic detective. The reversal of public opinion shocked the whole school and the media headlines exploded. In the center of Suwon Square, her throat was choked with hot tears and she smashed the torch and splashed sparks. Her eyes widened with wet eyes, her chest trembled and she felt hot on Ye Chen's arms. Thousands of students gathered around and shouted, "Long live Ye Chen, the truth will never die, God's leader." The parade pressured the principal to resign. Gu Xing faked his death and was escorted to live broadcast to reveal that Shen Qingqing, the mastermind, personally approved the third phase of the underworld, and the family crushed them all. The admiration exploded and her waist was scratched and her back was numb. The mansion in East Lake is surrounded by mist like a tomb, the iron gate creaks and the ghost door is ajar, and the air is filled with lavender and GP soot, sour and rotten in the lungs. Ye Chen, 3 media students, surrounded thousands of people in a sea of blood with torches, sirens roared, and FBI black-armored vehicles rumbled and blocked the road. Shen Qingqing's gentle face was white and bloodshot, and her lips were crushed. She stumbled in front of the window with her 3.8 centimeters high-heeled shoes. She grabbed the blue light of the hard drive and heated it in her arms. K-17 is not guilty. His voice was filled with poison and trembled like a candle. His gray eyes were round and full of panic, and his cheeks were stained with sweat and splashed against the window. His eyes were filled with despair and red streaks of regret. I wrongly convicted your family. The global pharma empire collapsed, but the black market for needle samples worth hundreds of millions of dollars is forever, and the evidence of self-destruction has been uncovered. The students gathered around in admiration with their eyes wide open and their mouths closed together as they shouted, Shen Qingqing was the mastermind who personally acupunctured himself from power. The media glare dazzled the reporter. The fat man's legs were soft and worshipped, gun-trembling defeat. The final moment of Ye Chen's encirclement of Zhejian, and the household spectrum exposed the scientific shady story. Win. The FBI's black-armored gun pointed at the mansion with a red dot and swiped an ice needle on her forehead. Shen Qingqing's air gun was pressed with oil, and Shen Qingqing knocked on the ground while retreating and hitting the table. The hard drive rolled to the ground and the blue light pulsated to expose the ironclad evidence. The high-level list, the principal's portrait, flashed red, and the list of political dignitaries flashed red. Han Xiao pointed at the pulsating coordinates of East Lake with her gray eyes, and her voice broke with glass. The strengthening chain is complete. The heat source of Shen Qingqing's mansion is isolated and helpless, the darknet copy failed to be whitewashed and blocked by the FBI, and her defeat was exposed in full. The mist of the East Lake mansion wraps around the iron fence like a remnant soul, the gray light of dawn pierces the blood-red torch waves, the roars of thousands of students hit the tomb-like walls, and the media flashbulbs flash like will-o'-the-wisps, the smell of magnesium mixed with the sour rot of lavender stings the lungs. The engine of the FBI's black-armored car roared and blocked the intersection. The red-dot ice needle of the gun barrel swept across Shen Qingqing's pale face. Her 3.8 centimeters high-heeled shoes shattered and thumped on the ground as she backed away. The hard drive's blue light pulsated and rolled on the table. The black hole in the muzzle of the gun creaked at her trembling fingertips, and the sound of honey and broken glass melted into the darkness of the night. Ye Chen, you can't win the global pharma empire. The black market injections of hundreds of millions of political figures will pulsate forever. Ye Chen's cold eyes were frozen, his teeth were grinding, and he was lying low. The psychological grid was secretly fighting. The hook was broken, but the 3-story server blueprint heat map in the mansion was the elevator code 1237. The biometric key, the remaining security ghost under his command threatened the holder of the pig chain, and Gu Sheng's fake death confession was not fully copied by the FBI. He roared as the mist passed through the cracks in the iron grill, scraping skin and causing blood to boil. Han Xiao paralyzed to monitor the false heat source. Su Wan rescued the witness and marched through the east side window to pressure and divert the FBI, and I pried the elevator with my silver needle and stabbed the heart of the server. The 3 ghost figures slid into the side door with the fog, rust splashing and clicking, and the air gun's oil pressure was as high as the corpse's breath. Ye Chen's eyes are frozen, his teeth are grinding and his silver needle spins around, the ending of the psychological grid. Shen Qingqing's mastermind's gun trembles and self-destructs, the hook is broken, Gu Sheng's fake death confession is copied by the FBI, global pharma's black market is exposed and a new situation is expanded, but the truth is revealed and the campus is shaken by justice. The roar of the waves of torches and willows reverberates into the lake fog, the black hole at the muzzle trembles and discords like a doomsday scythe, and Shen Qingqing collapses gently and wails into the darkness of the night. Han Zhao's gray eyes widened, her mouth widened, her Adam's apple rolled, her laptop buzzed, the Wi-Fi would-be fire flickered to black, her nose burst with lavender sweat, and her fingertips flew wildly through the VPN delay. Monster leader. 50 shots of the mansion surveillance red network were locked by hot scanning, and all his subordinates were black. The witness room in the east wing of the film pulses, and the false positive birds spread. My hacker backdoor mass spectrometry reproduces the phosphorus and fluoride paths. Gu Xing's platform. The hot breath sprayed, my neck was itchy, my legs were soft and I hit the wall, and the sound of worship was like a fire. 3 seconds to paralyze the entire FBI blind spot. You go to the elevator 1237. Su Wan had a fishbone stuck in her throat, her eyes were round and wet, and she was bursting into tears. She was dragging Ye Chen's arms, chest, spasming, hot pressure, and numbness on his back. Her skirt was wet and sticky, and her legs were trembling. She was brave and burning, God. Witness Li Zhe's diary continuation, video of a fight in the warehouse, email transfer. Shen Qingqing's kiss. The third-term pig was threatened with high heels by his subordinates, and the syringe in my belt was used to neutralize the aerosol parade torch and lead the FBI to the east. My finger trembled as I poked the mobile phone live broadcast barrage. The rescuer Shen was defeated and surrounded, and the heat wave of worship surged into my eyes and my waist tightened. Students gathered outside and shouted. Ye Chen entered the mansion to outwit Shen Qingqing's mastermind. The fat reporter knelt down in worship and shook his microphone, surrounded by thousands of people, and blocked the FBI. The detective raided the East Lake tomb, and the quantum lock home broken server blueprint exposed the K-17 black chain. The flash was dazzling and choked the nose, and the FBI's black armored gun pointed at the iron gate and whispered to the radio. 3 internal heat sources are in the blind zone, and the monitoring is paralyzed to confirm. Ye Chen is a ghost, low-lying, mist flowing through the ceiling ventilation duct, rust scratching the skin, blood dripping, psychological game knife twisting. His subordinates have gun arrays and hooks. My father uses a spectrometer, a home microscope, to check his pulse and perjury. Gu Sheng is alive and jumps with a silver needle to counterattack. He pressed his knees against the wall of the pipe and rolled the iron pipe to cover his footsteps. The silver needle whirled around to stab one person's carotid artery, neutralizing the K-17 residual poison aerosol. The white mist exploded and blinded his eyes. The black figure convulsed, foaming at the mouth, and fell to the ground. The brother's eyes were round and his copper bell eyes were protruding from his mouth. He couldn't close his eyes and the gun trembled and he retreated. Silver needle. Home neutralize. The heat source is silent. Hot sweat rolled down his forehead, and he knelt down with a wave of admiration. Monster. Professor Li Zizhu's continued diary USB flash drive was escorted by Shen Qingqing for the third phase of the Global Pharma 500 million dignitary test. The elevator door jingled and flashed red like a blood pupil. Ye Chen's silver acupuncture biological key ZZ electrolyte catalyzed the floating Shen Qingqing spiral fingerprint UV explosion. The sodium nitrite peak value of 1650 coincided with the sliding door opening. The air inside was moldy and rotten with GP soot and sour acid stinging the lungs. The 5 shadow men surrounded the witness room with a smell of gun oil and grinned ferociously. Secretary Shen ordered the last pig to be silenced. Ye Chen wanted the heat source to enter the elevator and lock it. Their boots thumped on the iron steps, and the infrared heat sweepers flashed like a net in their faces. Outside, Han Zhao's laptop buzzed with ghost fire, and the surveillance network was completely paralyzed. The black screen flashed, system crash and fake birds. Her gray eyes were hot and she shouted over the radio, "The paralysis is over." The FBI east side broke the window. Su Wan saved the pig, and the spy under his control was exposed. Gu Xing faked his death. Pulse video stabbed Shen Qingqing in the back. The roar of the student's torch echoed, and the fat reporter, Fat Sheikh, poked at the black armor. The surveillance paralyzed magic. Under the counterattack of Ye Chen's silver needle, the heat source in the witness room rescued the entire K-17 chain of evidence. The remaining 3 shadowy men retreated with their guns trembling, their faces twisting into snake scales. The black hole in the muzzle pointed to the ventilation duct, and the gun oil pressure was overwhelming. Ye Chen's silver needle flashed out of the mist, and the three men's neck veins were stabbed and convulsed. He snorted and gritted his teeth, took out a household spectrometer from his pocket and dropped electrolyte to demonstrate the peak value of 1650 fluorine, which has a half-life of 30 minutes. His subordinates glared at the copper bell, swallowed hard, and said, "Home, crush the private key server. We are following orders." The devil in the Qin dynasty is betting on pigs, and Gu Xingxing fakes his death to drag the security guards. He retreated in panic and stomped his feet in admiration, the true genius. The K-17 pig chain is exposed and the global pharma empire collapses. The iron door of the third-floor server room creaked and was ajar, the blue light heat map pulsated like a beating heart, and the air electrolytic odor contained lavender and sour rot stung the lungs, and the cabinet hummed and screamed. Shen Qingqing's gentle face was white and bloodshot, her lips were bitten into pieces, her high heels were tapping on the ground, she was staggering to grab the keyboard, and she was poking at the self-destruct code. The red screen flashed, countdown to 30 seconds to erase data. Her gray eyes were rounded with panic, and her cheeks were stained with hot sweat, monster Ye Chen. Server quantum backup flying on the dark web, my heart failure is normal and my ambition has sacrificed countless lives. The black market of global pharma's 500 million political injections will last forever, and your home cannot break the biological double key. The voice is filled with poison and the candle is shaking, and the fingertips are stuck and the keys are creaking. The hem of Su Wan's skirt was wet and sticky. The rust on the east side window scraped the blood on her legs. The silver light of the syringe on her belt was whirling around to stab the black shadow in her armpit. Vitamin C neutralized the aerosol. I personally signed and transferred the list of billions of political figures on global pharma's black market, and I witnessed Professor Lizet's self-inflicted injection of heart failure disguised. He handed over the USB flash drive with blue light to heat the almond-flavored K-17 residue with trembling fingers. His admiration burned and he smashed Su Wan's shoulder with hot pressure. Ye Chen's team was crushed, and our subordinates defeated us all. Shen Qingqing stepped back with high heels and bumped into the cabinet, his gun trembled and he pointed at the black hole of the three people and collapsed with a sinister smile, "Okay. I admit it. Personal ambitions." The principal signed a grant to suppress the report. K-17 was illegally synthesized and profited by global pharma's black market worth hundreds of millions. Professor Shen Lizezu pretended to be me with heart failure for more than 10 years signing, mixing, and acupuncture. Gu Xing obeyed the order of internal fighting in the warehouse, transaction, mail transfer, and the list of political dignitaries to be tested. Her gray eyes exploded with despair, her red threads burst into tears, and the red screen flashed for 10 seconds. Her gentle face twisted and howled, "But the server self-destructs and the network is broken. You can't stop the new situation of the empire." The door smashed, Gu Xing's shadow crawled into the security escort, his pulse was lively, he was frothing at the mouth, his legs were soft, and he worshipped Ye Chen's toes. "God Ye, have mercy on me." The fake death dragged the security guard to do all the tricks. Shen Qingqing, the mastermind, slapped me in the face and approved the synthesis. More transactions in the Global Pharma Alliance behind the scenes. The chain of political leaders in the black market of Southeast Asia continues, and the platform for transfers of 500 million to pigs in the wing meeting is expanding. My fingers trembled as I handed over the mobile phone to self-destruct and confessed to the backstabbing in the warehouse, and I was sweating and smashing. "Crush me all over, the FBI will always be in danger, but you win the campus." Ye Chen pushed the door with a silver needle, turned around and tore the shelves, the cables jingled, the power went out, and the fog burst out. Han Xiao and Su Wan threw themselves into the lavender sweat mixed with the residual smell of almonds. Their eyes widened and their legs pressed softly against Ye Chen's arms to heat them. Han Xiao's laptop quickly connected to the backdoor of the host's Wi-Fi. Oriole Fire Hacker, leader. Dual key Shen Qingqing GP cigarette but DNA, my mass spectrometer reproduces the 3 steps of phosphorus and fluoride, and the floating fingerprint is UV catalytic stamp. Su Wan choked in tears and smashed the USB copy. the witness's confession of the whole three-phase Lize video of the personal acupuncture, the parade media FBI pressured the move. Students outside torched the waves and roared. Shen Qingqing confessed to Gu Xing kneeling down to reveal the inside story. The fat reporter knelt on the microphone with trembling legs and said, "The raid was successful. The subordinates were neutralized and paralyzed to monitor and save the witness." Shen confessed his ambitions in the pig chain global pharma black market. Ye Chen's Silver Needle home intelligent pressure server won all. FBI black armor broke into Shen Qingqing's forehead with a gun pointed at the ice needle, and the air gun oil pressed against her high heels and she retreated and howled. Ye Chen's cold eyes squinted, the silver acupuncture server core sparks exploded and flashed with blue light, the household spectrometer dropped sodium nitrite to catalyze the floating double-key peak value of 1650, which matched the vitamin C neutralization and self-destruction. The white fog ghost jumped, and the data screen exploded the whole chain. K-17 blueprint heat map, victim list, senior principal signed funding meeting voice, accelerating the black market to hundreds of millions, Professor Lize's mouth-killing video almond-flavored diary USB flash drive, global pharma dignitary list Southeast Asian rotation insiders blood red ghost flash. The red screen goes black and, crack successfully backed up USB disk copy. Shen Qingqing's gun hit the ground and his high heels shattered. She knelt down with a white face and bloodshot eyes, and her eyes were red with despair. The FBI's black-armored handcuffs on her wrists were cold and squeaking as she was pushed out of the iron gate. The media's flash was dazzling. The reporter's fat man stared in admiration, the final moment. Ye Chen's cracked server data will be announced to the whole school soon. Global Pharma's new bureau hooks, but campus justice is revealed, and the reputation is soaring. The fog dispersed in the mansion, the sun shone on the iron gate at dawn, the embers of the torches crackled, the air was fresh and the lavender faded away, the students gathered around and carried Ye Chen on his shoulders, and the roar echoed by the lakeside, and the big screen barrage of the forum was full of blood. Ye Chen's genius detective toxicology hacker uses his wisdom to defeat the high-level conspiracy and win. Han Zhao's gray eyes were wrapped with copper bells and her mouth couldn't be closed. She threw hot breath at Ye Chen's chest, breathed out hot breath on his neck, and his legs were weak, monster magic. Double key home poke self-destruction, Gu Xing's confession expanded the new crisis, but the school was shocked, justice burned the sky, and the whole school announced the FBI headlines. The admiration exploded and the copy flew with fingers. Su Wan's throat was choked with tears, and she smashed the Blu-ray USB flash drive and splashed sparks. Her eyes widened, her chest trembled, and Ye Chen's waist was heated and his back was numb. Thousands of students gathered outside and shouted, "Long live Ye Chen, all the data has been exposed." The square in front of the school building was crowded with people. Ye Chen threw a copy of the USB flash drive and smashed it against the big screen. The blue light flashed and the peak value reached 1650. The principal's resignation statement made headlines in the media. The thick-framed doctoral student stared at passers-by and knelt down with tears on his knees. Household spectrum, crushing the quantum server. We laugh at the genius P-picture lunatic's misjudgment. The K-17 pig chain exposed Shen Qingqing's personal injection and ambition. Gu Xing knelt down to offer a new crisis. A wave of adoration surrounded him and his footsteps stomped wildly. The sun shines like broken gold on the square in front of the school building, and thousands of students are undulating like waves. The crackling embers of torches are filled with black smoke that fills the tip of the nose with a burning smell mixed with the humid lake breeze. The lingering fragrance of lavender and the sour smell of almond poison in the air are faintly piercing the lungs, like the lingering aftertaste of a dark curtain. The large screen blue light pulsates and explodes the entire chain of irrefutable evidence. The heat map of the K-17 synthetic blueprint flashes blood red, the gentle face of Shen Qingqing in the video of Professor Lize is personally acupunctured and ghosts are everywhere, the ghost words signed by high-level principals for funding are twisted, and the inside story of Global Pharma's list of political leaders in Southeast Asia is pulsating like a poisonous snake. Forum barrages were filled with blood-red messages, Detective Ye Chen crushes the quantum lock at home. Shen Qingqing kneels down and tricks Gu Xing into fake death, all explosions, justice burns the sky to become a campus legend. The chubby faces of the thick-framed doctoral students who had previously mocked were now twisted into the color of pig liver. Their knees buckled and they knelt down. Their copper-bell eyes bulged with hot tears and clinked and splashed on the slate. Fish bones stuck in their throats and they swallowed. Their trembling fingers poked at the peak 1650 fluorine substitution curve on the big screen. Home spectrum, exposed the school's forgery of 1400. We PhDs mocked him as a lunatic freshman intern bug with P-pictures, wrongly convicted K-17 pig chain Shen Qingqing's autograph and needle ambition. The monster genius crushed the quantum server East Lake Mansion, our legs are soft and we will worship forever. Passers-by girls screamed and pushed the skirts, their legs were wet and their faces were red and bursting with admiration. Ye Chen's silver needle counterattack. The FBI headlines for the reversal of the previous internet violence. The engine of the FBI's black armored convoy roared and blocked the four corners of the square. The red dot ice needle of the gun barrel swept the edge of the crowd. The iron chain escorting Shen Qingqing creaked and rubbed against her high heels and shattered into pieces. She made a pale grimace with bloodshot lips and bit into the honey with a sound of broken glass. She howled, Ye Chen, you exposed the campus shady, but the global pharma empire dark network backup pulses, the black market injections for hundreds of millions of politicians in Southeast Asia are starting a new pig chain, and I sacrificed the pig's heart failure to pretend to be just an iceberg. The black armored agent's iron handcuffs cracked her wrists. She staggered back and bumped into the iron fence, with rusty skin splashing across her face. Her gray eyes widened in panic, hot sweat rolled down her cheeks, and her nose was pungent with lavender sourness. The students around her yelled, long live the mastermind, Ye Chen, the data will live forever. Gu Xing crawled to the FBI escort car on his knees in convulsions, pretending to have a dead pulse, frothing at the mouth, and frothing at the mouth. He passed his cell phone with trembling fingers and blew himself up to record a confession and stabbed his back in the warehouse. He rolled a needle on his Adam's apple and worshipped Ye Chen on his toes. Ye Chen, spare your life, all the moves. Shen Qingqing slapped me in the face and personally approved the K-17 synthesis for profit, and transferred money to Global Pharma in the wing meeting. The rotation of 500 million political dignitaries in Southeast Asia's black market continues. I pretended to die and dragged the ghost pig chain inside the security guard to expand. The FBI agent's gun butt smashed into his shoulder, and he curled up and burst into tears. The student's torch embers poked his face and grinned, kneel down and exposed the insider's backstabbing mastermind. Ye Chen's family uses the spectrum to test your pulse and crush him alive. The FBI is in a new crisis but the campus wins. Ye Chen is carrying thousands of people on his shoulders, the heat wave is overwhelming him, his chest is rising and falling. His eyes are squinting at the pulsating blue light of the big screen, and the secret battle of the psychological grid is like a knife twisting. The campus shady scene is exposed and justice burns to the sky. The reputation of the legendary internship is transformed into an official FBI bonus data disk, but the serial murder hook of the remnant of the global pharma empire is pulsating Southeast Asia to prepare for the new situation. He shook off the thick-framed doctoral student's worshipful hand, and twirled his silver needle in his pocket, grinding his teeth and growling, Han Xiao Suan, the aftermath is harvested. The president resigned and the media headlines exploded. We outwitted the high-level conspiracy and grew into a legend, but the empire's dark network flying pig chain did not die. The warmth of the sun was dazzling, the lake breeze was blowing, but there was a faint mist, and the skin was scraped and blood was boiling in the cracks of the iron grate. Han Zhao's gray eyes were hot and the copper bell was wrapped around her eyes. She fluttered at Ye Chen's arms and chest, sprayed hot breath on his neck, sprayed lavender on his neck, sweated and itched, and his legs were soft and pressed against the wall. His laptop buzzed, Wi-Fi ghost fire flashed, and he copied the ultimate USB flash drive. The monster leads a win-win growth. The hackers' backdoor mass spectrometry reproduced the three-step phosphorus and fluoride GP cigarette but DNA floating fingerprints. The surveillance was paralyzed in East Lake coordinates, FBI blind spots were poked with double-key self-destruct neutralization, and the forum was promoted. The behind-the-scenes parade to pressure the principal to clear his name failed. Her fingers flew wildly, her throat was choked with admiration. The fame of the campus is soaring to the sky. The official treasure data disk FBI bonus. We will always be prepared to fight against the new crisis of global pharma's black market in Southeast Asia. The students roared, her legs softened and she knelt down in tears, burning the toes of Ye Chen's shoes. Su Wan had a fishbone stuck in her throat, her eyes were round with wet eyes, and sparks flew from the Blu-ray U disc. She dragged Ye Chen's waist, chest, spasms, and heat pressure to scratch her back and numbness. Her skirt was wet and sticky, her legs were trembling, her brave fire was burning, and her cheeks were wet and hot. God's leader rescued the witnesses. The entire chain was exposed. Li Zhe's diary, Almond K. 17, third pig video, Shen Qingqing personally approved and gave injections, and I belted a syringe to neutralize the aerosol and put pressure on tens of thousands of students in the parade on the east side window. Fingers trembled and poked live on the mobile phone. The barrage rolled wildly. Su Wan organized justice and defeated Gu Niling, and the heat of admiration surged around her waist and waist. Growing legend, fame, status, treasure, our medical school internship instructor, FBI witness protection, Global Pharma's new game hook, but the truth will not die. The fat reporter knelt down with weak legs and poked her face with the microphone. The heroine's live broadcast reversal. Ye Chen's team's home-crushing science shady headlines will last forever. The iron door of the principal's office smashed, and the FBI's black armor broke into the gun barrel with a red dot and swept away the rotten air, filled with soot and acid, which stung the lungs. The principal trembled and retreated, hitting the table with an avalanche of documents. His ghostly face was bloodshot and his lips were biting. His resignation statement flashed with a red screen, sponsored to press the newspaper to admit exposure. The rumor that Gu Xing committed suicide collapsed. The principal fell to his knees with tears rolling down his throat, admiring his Adam's apple and rolling the needle. The first-year student's home spectral lock bio double-key demonstration peaked at 1650, and our senior management ridiculed the genius for misjudgment of the P-picture lunatic. The media exploded with irrefutable evidence, and justice prevailed. The FBI cuffed his wrists and pushed him out of the square, and the students yelled, "Long live Ye Chen." The old technician who witnessed at the edge of the square had weak legs and was helped up by Su Wan. His throat was choked and his eyes were round and wet. He handed over the residue of almonds blanched with blue light on a USB flash drive. "Ye Chen, save me. Shen Qingqing's mansion server blueprint hot map. I personally signed the transfer. Global Pharma's black market has a roster of billions of political figures. Li Zhe personally witnessed the expansion of the third phase of pigs with acupuncture. His fingers trembled in worship. Ye Chen's shoulders were pressed with heat, panic turned to admiration, and tears fell to the ground. The mole previously threatened to kill the patient, pulse jump, and do a home vital test. We are all recruiting for internal fighting in the wing meeting. The girls from the medical school around him screamed and their legs were weak, old technician's ironclad proof. Ye Chen's silver needle catalyzed the ultraviolet explosion of Shen Qingqing's spiral fingerprint, and the elevator code 1237 ventilation duct was suddenly crushed on the third floor. Media headlines exploded. The fat reporter, fat trembling Mike, poked Ye Chen in the face with a flash of light and a pungent smell of magnesium. Ultimate victory. Toxicological examination of the poisoning conspiracy in the university laboratory revealed the deadly scientific secrets. Ye Chen used a microscope at home, his father's spectroscopy instrument, the professor's fingernail residue. Fluorine substituted the half-life of 30 minutes, cracked the warehouse number 4 transfer account. The hacker log of Sheng's workstation exploded, and the whole school announced that the FBI wanted Global Pharma. The camera flashed Ye Chen's cold eyes, and the students raised their shoulders and shouted, echoing by the lakeside. The air was warm and lavender faded from the freshness. but there was a faint pulsating power grid war on black market injections in Southeast Asia. Ye Chen jumped out of the crowd and whirled around with a silver needle, stabbing the air with nourishing electrolyte catalytic demonstration. The remaining K-17 peak was 1650. The large screen blue light reproduced the whole chain of victim lists. Ghost flashes. He grinded his teeth and roared about the psychological game, growing up from witnessing the mysterious death of the professor and the toxicological cover-up, to teaming up with Han Xiao and Su Wan to solve multiple perjury dangers, confronting Shen Qingqing and Gu Sheng. The scientific conspiracy was exposed, and justice prevailed in the school. However, after the collapse of the empire, the remaining insiders took control of the situation, and the black market with hundreds of millions of pigs chained by Southeast Asian politicians will continue forever. The thick-framed doctoral students knelt down and worshipped, and their footsteps were stomped, growing up a legend. The IQ of the freshman interns crushes the ambitions of the high-level students, and we will be the eternal academic hegemons. Han Xiao and Su Wan held Ye Chen's arm with hot pressure, her chest and waist were numb, and her gray eyes were wet and warm. Leadership Aftermath Harvest. Fame Campus Legend Status Internship turned into official treasure data disk FBI bonus, Global Pharma Underworld Major Injection hundreds of millions of new games to prepare for the war. The air is warm with the fragrance of lavender, the gentle breeze of the lake soothes the heart-burning sense of achievement, but there is a hidden power grid secret war, the serial murders after the collapse of the empire are pulsating, the truth will not die the moment the data is exposed, justice will burn forever. Ye Chen's eyes were cold and frozen, and a dark shadow fell on his face under the calm water, and the silver needle was spinning in his pocket and grinding his teeth with silver light. The campus shady story ends with a legend of growth, fame, status, and treasures will last forever, but the truth will not die. Justice burns the sky, the new global pharma empire, Southeast Asia's black market injection rotation, the three of us the ghosts and ghosts of man are low and the intelligence is suppressed again. The sun breaks into lungs, roars of beasts surge in the square, students' torches crackle with embers, media flashes, and will-o'-the-wisps flash wildly. The air is fresh and warm, and the heart-burning sense of accomplishment explodes, but it is suppressed and weird. The power grid is pulsing with secret war, and the sour smell of lavender in the wind by the lake is like the whisper of new conspiracy. A few days later, the iron door of the biochemistry laboratory creaked and was ajar, and the air was filled with moldy rot and poisonous almond residue. Han Zhao's laptop Wi-Fi ghost fire black frequency scanned the heat sources of the dark web in Southeast Asia, leader. New email wing meeting voice global pharma remnant party transfer list of politicians, copies of Shen Qingqing's confession in prison flu, our family prepared for war with Spectrum. Su Wan belt syringe silver light spinning, witness old technician FBI protect new clues, Li Zhe's sequel to the Southeast Asian pig chain's ironclad evidence. Ye Chen pushed the door, the silver needle stabbed the lock, and the psychological cold blade was righteous, growing from the campus to the world, the toxicology test continues to expose the shady story, and the new crisis hook cuts us off. The freshmen on the campus outside shouted, Ye Chen's legendary sequel. The blue light of the sun shone on the iron gate, and the suspense wrapped around the iron gate was like a feeling of undying truth. Han Xiao and Su Wan held Ye Chen's arm with hot pressure, and her chest and waist were numb. The ghosts of three people slipped out of the gap in the foggy iron gate of the square. The lake wind blew the skin and blood rolled down the skin. The hot laptop buzzed and the ghost fire flashed. Global Pharma Dark Web Backup Southeast Asia Wing Heat Source Coordinates Pulsed, New Pig Phase 3 Launch Politician List Continued. Han Zhao's gray eyes widened, her legs softened, and she breathed out, New Crisis for Leadership. Hackers tracked the path of phosphorus and fluoride, GP-DNA of cigarette butts has revealed new fingerprints, we are preparing for war. Su Wan's eyes were filled with tears and her shoulders were burning with courage, Almighty God.